Good morning, everyone. I would like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the first interim joint meeting for legislative operations and elections. We do have a few members that are, the nature of interim is we have some members in Carson City in the legislative building. We also have some members joining us virtually. So with that, you'll see there's not many physically here right now, but we do have, it appears, and once we take attendance, we do have quorum. So with that, Ms. Creamer, will you please take the roll?
Senator Severs-Gansert.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Here.
Assemblywoman Dickman. Here. Senator Cannizzaro. Senator Orenshaw.
Here.
Assemblywoman Carlton.
Here.
Assemblyman Matthews.
Here.
Chair Miller.
Here. Ms. Creamer, would you please mark Leader Cannizzaro present when she arrives? With that, I would like to take just a few minutes to introduce the members of the committee. If everyone could just take a minute or two and introduce yourself, starting with our Vice Chair, Orenshaw.
Good morning, Madam Chair. James Orenshaw. I represent State Senate District 21. I've been very fortunate in the past to represent Assembly District 12 in the Assembly, and it's really been great getting to serve on the Elections and Legislative Operations Committee every session that I've been able to represent my constituents in Southern Nevada. And I'm former chair of the Assembly Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections, and also former chair of the Senate Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections. So look forward to working with you on this committee and all the good work and all the help from the Legislative Council Bureau. I think we've got a great team, and it was a pleasure working with you last session. I look forward to all the good work we'll do this session.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Senator Gansert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like Senator Orenshaw, I have the honor of serving on elections in both the Assembly and the Senate, so I'm happy to be here today. My district is 15 up in Washoe County, so thank you.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Carlton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be here. This is a committee that I don't have a lot of background in. It just proves that no matter how long you serve in the legislature, there's always something new to learn. So I look forward to working with the committee and its staff.
Well, welcome, Assemblywoman. With your breadth of knowledge and experience, I'm sure there's a lot you can add to this. So thank you so much for joining us. Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It feels a little strange to be here by myself, but I'm glad we have such fun staff members. This is my last session was my first time on Leg Jobs. I served in 2015, but did not have the pleasure of serving on Leg Jobs. So I've learned a lot, and I look forward to what we do with this committee during this interim. I represent District 31, which is mostly Sparks and a little part of Reno. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, everyone. My name is Assemblywoman Gonzalez, and this is my first legislative interim committee on legislative operations. I was honored to serve during the legislative session, and so I'm just looking forward to continuing the work that we did and learning more about this committee with the chair and vice chair. Thank you so much. Oh, and I represent Assembly District 16.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Assemblyman Matthews.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. I'm Andy Matthews. I'm a freshman assemblyman. I have the honor of representing District 37, which is in Northwest Las Vegas, and I had the pleasure of serving on the Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections during last year's regular session, and I'm looking forward to serving on this interim committee as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman. And Ms. Creamer, please mark Senate Majority Leader Cannizzaro present. And while I'll give her a minute, but I'm going to have her introduce herself. Leader Canizaro is actually an alternate today for Senator Roberta Lang. And so later we'll have a presentation on the new format of our interim committees. And one of the things that comes with that is the ability to actually have alternates. So today, Leader Canizaro is filling in for Senator Lang, who will be with us in the next meetings. Thank you so much for filling in.
No, and thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm glad to be here with you today, sitting as an alternate for Senator Lang. I chaired the Legislative Operations and Elections Committee in 2017 and have been a member of that committee ever since. So I'm excited to be here, and thanks for letting me crash the party today.
Thank you for joining us. And I am Assemblywoman Brittany Miller. I represent Assembly District 5 in the Western Summerlin Lakes area of Nevada. This is my second term serving on the committee and also my first term serving as chair of Legislative Operations and Elections. Also was able to partner with Vice Chair Orenshaw during a special session. So with that, we will go ahead and continue. Again, we know that during the regular session, we all participated and continue to prosper a culture of respect and listening, and even though our ideas may be different, but that always making sure that we respect one another for those differences. So we will keep that culture of professionalism and fairness as we go through this entire interim session. With that, I'd also like to introduce our Legislative Council Bureau staff who actually keep everything running that you see. First, we have Haley Prohl and Nicholas Antony from the Research Division. They will be serving as our committee policy analyst. They help with all the background information, research, and everything else that keeps the committee running. We have Aaron Sturdivant from the Legal Division, who is our legal counsel. Karen Hope from the Fiscal Analyst Division, who serves as our fiscal analyst, and Lisa Creamer, who is our committee secretary, also all from the Research Division. We all know that during all interims when we're split between Carson and Las Vegas, but especially now that we have an additional component of virtual participation, that we couldn't do any of this without our broadcasting and production services. So thank you so much for all that you do for our committees. A few other housekeeping announcements I want to make is that, again, the agenda items at any time can be taken out of order or combined or moved. Also, meeting materials for this committee's agenda can be found on the legislative website, which is Nellis. We will have public comment at the beginning and the end of this meeting. Each person speaking for public comment, we ask that you limit your comments to 2 minutes each. Members of the community who would like to make public comment, who are not physically here or physically in Carson City right now, can do so by calling in. The phone number is 1-669-900-6833. There will be a prompt asking for a meeting ID, and that meeting ID is 813-7874-7720, and then press pound. At that point, broadcast and production services will indicate when it's your turn to speak. The public is also welcome to provide written comments, and those can be submitted electronically during or after the meeting by email to LOE, as in Legislative Operations and Elections, interim at lcb.state.nv.us. Or you can also mail them to the Research Division at 401 South Carson Street, Carson City, Nevada, 89701. You also can fax your comments to 775-684-6400. On our agenda today, we believe that this will not run a full day until 4 or 5, as some of our interim committees run. So with that, we made the choice not to break for an actual lunch. We will break for a 10-15 minute, kind of physical reprieve, get a snack kind of break. But often when the idea is get out earlier or have lunch. We chose to not have a lunch. So just so everyone's aware of the pace of today's meeting. Also, we ask that those that are participating virtually, please continue to leave your cameras on so that we know that we still maintain quorum. Of course, I'm going to ask that everyone in each chamber or committee room, as well as physically in the rooms, make sure that you please turn off your cell phones and anything that's going to make noise during our meeting. So with that, we will move into agenda item 2, which is public comment. Again, I ask that comments be limited to 2 minutes a person. We will have public comment again at the end of the meeting. And with that, I will bounce between each different room and virtual and telephone to ensure that everyone desiring to make public comment is heard. So with that, let's begin here in Las Vegas. If there's anyone in the room that would like to approach and make public comment, please do so. And again, Ms. Prohl will be timing everyone for the 2 minutes.
There we go. Thank you. I'm Bill Herrenberg, B-I-L-L, last name Herrenberg, H-A-R-E-N-B-U-R-G. And I'm here to testify in support of a resolution calling for a convention of states. I encourage all the committee members to learn more about Convention of States and Article 5 of the Constitution. I've been with Convention of States for a little less than 3 years, and I will say that it's a very professional group of volunteers. In the words of the Constitution, we the people. The group here in Nevada is growing very quickly, and we are interested in seeing the federal government get tied back so that the states can do more. That was the founders' intent, that the states contain most of the power. Why do we have a Department of Education when we here in Nevada can see that our children get educated? With a local school board and some encouragement from Carson City, that is all we really need. In addition to limiting overreach, we are looking for term limits and imposing fiscal constraints on the federal government. I'm concerned that the federal government is not what I would like to leave my children and grandchildren. I would say that all of you on this committee, Senate and Assembly members, are the most powerful people in the United States. You are closest to the people. It is much easier for me to contact someone here in Nevada rather than way off in Washington, D.C. I urge you to look at Convention of States and Article 5 of the Constitution and see that we have the means to do what we need to control the overreach of the federal government. All these unfunded liabilities and projects that give to the states to get done and then never fund them, that's not the way we should be doing business. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for your service to the people of Nevada. All of us together can move the state forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you for reminding me as well that I need to remind everyone else to please state your name and spell your name so that we can have it correct for the record. So thank you for reminding me of that. With that, there's no one else here in Las Vegas. Is there anyone in Carson City that would like to come forward for public comment? We're just waiting because we can't see Carson City right now. Assemblywoman Dickman, is there anyone there?
Yes. No, that was yes to
Great.
Chairwoman.
Now, yes, thank you, Assemblywoman. We do see someone. So, sir, please proceed when you're ready.
Your time. And now it's on. Okay, I've got it. I would like to thank the committee members and staff for this opportunity to provide testimony supporting the inclusion of a Convention of States Article 5 resolution on the Joint Legislative Operations and Elections Committee agenda for 2022. I am John Quant, that's John with an H, Q-U-A-N-D-T, the legislative liaison for the Convention of States, Nevada. We're part of a national Convention of States grassroots organization working to save our country. I sent each committee member and the research staff an email yesterday providing details about the Convention of States. I'm here to request that this committee and the Nevada Legislature take action and stop one of the greatest threats to freedom our country has ever had to confront. That threat is a corrupt and out-of-control federal government, actively and effectively eroding the liberty and freedoms we have sacrificed to secure and defend. It is doing so by creating debilitating debt, imposing draconian mandates, and distorting the constitutional rule of law. Effectively creating an authoritarian regime designed to subjugate the states, keep elitists in power, and most important, restrict individual citizens from exercising their inalienable rights. The fault for all of this is ours. Our generation fell asleep on duty, and the sooner we admit that, the sooner that we can work towards a solution to those problems we allowed through our own neglect. It would be wonderful if we could ignore the federal government and live our lives in peace, but we're realizing the consequences of that unrealistic notion. A centralized, unwarranted control of the state's constitutionally granted authority was one of the most significant threats to freedom the founders had the foresight to anticipate. This is why they provided the people and their elected representatives the ultimate control over federal overreach and tyranny that inevitably accompanies it. An Article 5 resolution is the solution which the Constitution affords the people in state legislatures to peacefully rein in an overbearing and intrusive federal government. A convention of states that limits discussion specifically to responsible
Mr.
federal
Kwan,
spending. Yes.
your 2 minutes are up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you once again for the opportunity.
But-
Can I got about.
Well, thank you.
I got about
Thank
two.
you,
Okay,
Mr.
thank
Kwan.
you.
We keep it very consistent, 2 minutes, but I do want you to know that we all do have the physical copies.
Okay.
That they were printed for all of the members, and we do have the physical copies of your email.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairwoman, thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. You as well. Is there anyone else in Carson City that would like to make public comment? Okay, not seeing anyone approaching Carson City, I'd like to open the lines. Broadcasting, is there anyone on the telephone that would like to call in and make public comment?
If you would like to offer public comment on today's meeting, please press *9 to take your place in the queue.
Good morning. This is Tracy Thomas, TRACEY THOMAS. In consideration of the automatic voter registration process and the voter registration list maintenance, it is imperative to include processes for verification of all qualifications of a potential voter, as well as providing adequate access to registration information for challenges allowed under NRS 293.303. NAC 293.270, Item 3 states a provisional ballot is only to be counted if the clerk determines that all of several requirements are satisfied. There are several that are not currently verified through same-day registration, the primary one being citizenship. NRS 293.675, Item 1I states that lists must ensure integrity. NAC 293.458 states the clerk must certify that the information is accurate and complies with relevant state and federal law. NRS 293.800, Item 2 states the penalty for a public officer who willfully neglects their duty or willfully performs in such a way as to hinder the objects and purposes of election law is guilty of a Category E felony. During the Washoe County Registrar of Voters presentation to the Board of Commissioners on April 13, 2021, Mr. Velashan and Ms. Spicula stated they are not verifying citizenship. These statements can be found at the third hour in the video posted at the bottom of the Registrar's website. This is a vital concern for many residents and commissioners and must be addressed. One process improvement to assist clerks with their legal responsibility is to have the Department of Motor Vehicles issue driver's licenses of different colors, distinguishing between citizens and non-citizens. Another process improvement is to add 2 boxes next to box 6 on the application, which is the box for state or country of birth. These 2 boxes should provide for date and state of naturalization, if applicable. These low-hanging improvements can be accomplished quickly with minimal impact and cost to current processes. Please consider implementing them immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Broadcasting, is there anyone else on the line?
Thank you, Chair. The line is open and working. However, there are no other callers wishing to offer public comment at this time.
Okay, we always like to wait just a few moments to ensure no one else is in the process of dialing in. Does there appear to be anyone dialing in?
No, Chair. The line is still open, but no one is making public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you for that. With that, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Just want to remind everyone that we will have another opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting. With that, we will go ahead and move on to agenda item 3, which is an overview of the committee's duties and responsibilities. The presentation will be by our own senior policy analyst and GIS specialist from the research division of LCB, Ms. Haley Prohl. So with that, Ms. Prohl, when you are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. Haley Prohl, Committee Policy Analyst with the Research Division. Just a short disclaimer before I begin. As Legislative Council Bureau staff, I can neither advocate for nor against any legislative proposals that come before this committee. I'm here to assist the committee with any questions concerning policies that may arise. In addition, the Research Division is available to provide information and assistance on a confidential basis to members on any topic. So please feel free to reach out to me or my colleagues at any time. This morning, I will be going over the committee's duties and responsibilities, which are outlined in the committee brief that is included in your meeting packet today and also available online on the committee's meeting page. In addition to the committee's duties and responsibilities, the brief also includes information about the committee's membership, meeting dates, staff contact information, and related reports and publications that may be of interest to the committee. On the first page of the brief, you will find a list of legislators and alternates appointed to the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections, followed by a section on the responsibilities of the committee pursuant to Assembly Bill 443, which passed during the 2021 legislative session. AB 443 significantly changed the interim structure of the legislative interim, including newly creating this committee. This committee has jurisdiction over the same issues that fall under the purview of the Senate and Assembly standing committees on legislative operations and elections, and in addition has jurisdiction over issues relating to governmental purchasing as mandated by AB 443. The committee may request up to 10 bill draft requests for the 2023 legislative session that address issues related to legislative operations and elections. Additionally, the committee may vote to direct staff to draft letters to relevant stakeholders and to include policy statements in the final committee report, which is a report drafted by staff after the work of this committee concludes that summarizes the committee's activities, findings, and recommendations. On page 2 of the brief, you will find a list of priority issues of study that the committee may choose to focus its time and attention on this interim. I'd like to add in regard to constitutional amendments that Legislative Council Bureau staff is currently drafting the condensations, explanations, arguments, and fiscal notes for the 2 joint resolutions that were approved in identical form by both the 2019 and 2021 legislatures and will be placed on the 2022 general election ballot. These resolutions include Assembly Joint Resolution 10, which proposes to amend the Nevada Constitution to prospectively increase the minimum wage, and Senate Joint Resolution 8, which proposes to amend the Nevada Constitution to guarantee equal rights. So this ballot question language is anticipated to be presented and voted upon by the Legislative Commission in June before forwarding to the Secretary of State for placement on the ballot. So just an update on that process for the committee. Next in the brief, you will find a section on relevant publications and reports that may be of interest to this committee. These include publications and reports produced by the Legislative Council Bureau and also mandated by statute. The Research Division of the Legislative Council Bureau prepares publications on many major policy areas, including legislative operations and elections, and to date has published a few publications relating to the 2022 election cycle. These include a list of legislative candidates for the 2022 primary election and a publication on term limits that was just posted yesterday. So these and more can be found through the link to the division's research content page, which is in the brief. And additionally, you will find a link to reports that must be submitted to the legislature in the brief if you would like to dig deeper into certain issues. And on page 3 of the brief, we have the meeting dates for the 2021-2022 interim. The final meeting on August 12th will include a work session where the committee will consider its bill draft requests for the 2023 legislative session. And finally, the brief includes a list of the Legislative Council Bureau staff who will provide support to the committee during this interim. Again, please feel free to contact us at any time with questions relating to the committee. Chair Miller, this concludes my presentation, and I would welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Prohl. Members, do we have any questions for Ms. Prohl? It doesn't look like we have any questions. I will say that generally we can see more, but I'm not able to see in Carson City. So Assemblywoman Dickman, it's bouncing between. So Assemblywoman Dickman, if you have a question, please feel free to speak up, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a question, Assemblywoman?
Well, I actually do, but I don't know who the question is for. It might be for legal. But I received an email from someone this morning who insists that this committee can pass regulations such as, in my opinion, regulations that would go before the Legislative Commission, but like, for example, R080. So would that be a question for you, or would it be a legal question?
I think you're correct, and legal is there in Carson City, I believe, right?
Yes.
Okay. So could you ask your question again?
Does this committee have the authority to pass regulations that would affect election law?
Erin Sturdivant, Legislative Council Bureau. I would have to review the enabling legislation of the committee to review the authority. Generally, it's not an issue during the interim because we've changed the interim structure, so I have to review how this works. And I will respond to you after the meeting and let you know.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the question, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Assemblywoman. And yes, generally, the role of the interim committees is to review and hear updates and reports, as well as possible things to take action on when we're in the full session. Because again, this is not the full body. So we are, I would be very surprised if it came back from legal that we had any authority to actually pass any regulations or laws. but it is a very good question. Thank you so much for that.
Appreciate that, your input and legal.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Ganser?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, in looking at the agenda, all the items, I believe, are listed for possible action. And I think maybe it's a little confusing because that suggests almost that we can pass or make proposals. I mean, eventually maybe we'll come up with some bill drafts, but it looks like there are things that we will be passing and propose. I guess we could still propose, but when I look at the actual items themselves, it talks about updates and overviews. And so I think that's part of the confusion is because of the for possible action on the agenda item for most of the items.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nick Anthony from the Research Division for the record. In preparing the agenda along with the open meeting law, staff reviews various items, and it's consistent practice to mark for possible action on any item upon which this body may take a vote. I don't know that that's the chair's intention today, but for conformance with the open meeting law, they're properly noticed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And just for, clarity for everyone in the public as well, is that we will have a work session. The last committee meeting will be a work session. And at that point, we will be voting to determine which bills we will move forward as committee bills to present during the regular session. So at that point, you will see us voting as members, but we're actually just voting for consensus to see which items we will pick up to move forward as committee bills in the regular session. So thank you for those questions and the opportunity to clarify. Any other questions, members? Okay, with that, we will go ahead and close that agenda item and move on to agenda item 4, which is an update on the automatic voter registration process. Our presenters today are Mr. Thomas Martin, the manager of the Division of Research and Project Management from the DMV, Ms. Heather Carmen, who is the Assistant Registrar of Voters for Washoe County. Mr. Martin and Ms. Carmen will be presenting on Zoom, and there are no additional slides or materials, I understand. So with that, Mr. Martin, I believe you're presenting first. Please proceed when you are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you are correct. I do not have any slides or anything, so it will be just me explaining kind of the DMV's process. So first, I'd like to say good morning to you, Madam Chair, and the members of the committee. For the record, my name is Thomas Martin, and I am a DMV Services Manager at the Department of Motor Vehicles in our Research and Project Management Division. I am also the program manager for the DMV's AVR program, and today I'll be providing just a high-level overview of the current state of the AVR program at the DMV and how it looks from both the customer and the DMV staff perspective, as basically from a start to finish kind of process. So with that, I'll start with essentially our in-office transactions. We have several transactions that we do complete. They're in-office transactions at your technician windows, as you know today. We also have a MyDMV platform, which is an online services platform that we use for online transactions to the most degree possible, and also some back office transactions for driver's license and ID issuances. But first, we'll speak about the in-office transactions. Essentially, just start with the fact that a customer comes in and completes a driver's license or ID card application. And when called upon to a DMV services technician's window, they present the application and any applicable source documents. Those source documents can be U.S. birth certificate, passport, immigration documents, social security card, etc. Any documents that are required by federal real ID regulations as well as state regulations to prove name, date of birth, social, name changes, and any other applicable verifiable information for the issuances of credentials from the DMV. When the technician receives this information, the technician has to verify that the applicant has fully completed the application And part of that process is essentially just a full review from the very first part, which is the first name, and making sure they check the boxes of what kind of credential they're looking to receive. And also work their way through the automatic voter registration section, which is on the first page of the application, right about halfway down. And that section has quite a few questions that are requirements to be answered. First one being, are you a United States citizen? And this is just a question that's an attestment by the customer. The DMV has no input on these questions whatsoever. We don't ask them if it's true, correct, or anything. They do sign the application at a later point where they attest to that information. We also ask, are you 18 years of age or older? And then if they're not 18, we ask, are you currently 17 and would like to pre-register? And a pre-registration was a law that passed the last session with ABR when that came out. And basically, if they say no to the are you 18 and they say yes to the pre-registration question, we'll talk about the ABR process a little bit later, but that puts them in this pre-registration process, and we proceed with the automatic voter registration. With the application, due to the fact that the federal law, there is a requirement that a driver's license or ID application shall also serve as an application to register to vote, which that law has been in place for quite some time at the federal level. So that when the AVR program was implemented, it kind of made it an easy transition from the Secretary of State's long form that the customer would fill out separately, and it all be included onto the one form. So that form is a one-stop shop for driver's license credentialing, ID credentialing, automatic voter registration, and many other programs as well, such as selective service, etc. So if one of those questions is not answered, the citizen, the 18 or the pre-registration, if they say they're not 18, if one of those questions are not answered, for the DMV, we actually reject that application because that renders that application incomplete, which we cannot take incomplete applications. So we have to ensure we do our part to make sure the customer does answer all questions. At this point, once we've verified all the information, we have source documents in front of us. We verify the name, date of birth, social, etc. that is identified on the source documents. We verify that information on the actual driver's license application that's presented. At that point, it simply becomes data entry. So it goes from, and we actually enter the information into our computer system from a start to finish on the application to make sure it's just a streamlined process and ensure the accuracy of the information being entered. It's entered into our database, and that includes the AVR specific information. So when we did roll out the automatic voter registration from the DMV perspective, we did actually create a separate window, screen, if you will, in our system that allows the DMV and the staff technician to put that information into that window. So that way it is a separate piece of information to see that it is accurate according to what is on the application that's in front of them. And while that information is being entered, one of the key components that was built into our system was some automatic filtering for basically eligibility requirements that were discussed and defined as part of the initial planning stages of the AVR program. The filters are essentially built into the system that allows the DMV to remove somebody that is not necessarily eligible for the automatic voter registration process based on the information provided. So some of those filters, excuse me, some of those filters are if the transaction type for the credential is a driver authorization card, that's an automatic filter. And if the applicant's birthday on record indicates they are 16 or younger, so at the DMV, we do issue credentials to individuals that are anywhere from ages 10 years of age and up. Those are ID cards and driver's license and permits for 15 and a half. So we do have quite a bit of credentials that are issued to under 16. So they are also removed from the automatic voter registration process. If the applicant presents an immigration document that is not indicative of U.S. citizenship, and what that means is we have naturalization certificates, U.S. citizenship certificates, and all the way down to I-94s, et cetera, and the whole range in between. So filters have been placed on certain documents in the system that will remove an applicant from the AVR process if they present that document. And those documents are defined in in our NAC 293 regulations, and those are what we abide by when we built this filter into our system. Also, if the applicant answers no, so those previous questions of are you a citizen, are you 18, or do you want to pre-register? If the answer to any one of those questions is no, our system is built to also automatically filter them out based on that applicant's response. Excuse me. So once the technician's in the AVR tab, they've entered all the information, they go back and they verify and from the very first screen all the way through to make sure data entry is correct, date of birth, name, social, address, any driver's license details as far as driver record, etc. They verify all this information with a manual review of the paper application versus what they have received through electronic verifications on the back end. They consider the transaction complete at that point in time as far as the data entry goes. And then they will move forward with advancing the transaction to the payment screen. And the payment screen is truly where it's the data entry is done. We take that to the next step of the transaction, but there's a step in the process there before we collect payment where the DMV will actually print out a confirmation receipt. We call it the DLID confirmation sheet. So that's for the driver's license ID information. But one of the enhancements the DMV made after we went live with the AVR program the first time is after a few months, we decided instead of having multiple pieces of paper, we condensed everything onto one verification. So the customer is verifying in one line all the way down this form, they can actually see that the information that we have entered into our system is accurate and correct. So that's that opportunity for the customer. And for everybody that's had transactions at the DMV, everybody has provided the same exact form. Some fields may be blank based on no information present on the application. So once the customer verifies this information, if they go through and they determine that, hey, I verified it, that my last name's spelled incorrectly or whatever the case may be, we can actually go back and update that information. Another example is if we're in the AVR screen of our system and the customer selected, no, I'm not a US citizen to one of the AVR questions, and the system says yes, that means they're actually in the AVR process. And if that's the case, we can actually go back and update that as long as the customer lets us know that we have actually made a mistake entering the data. We go back, correct it. When we select no back in the screen, those automatic filters kick in. So it doesn't matter at what point we do that, those filters are there regardless. And we can do this as many times as necessary until the information is correct. Luckily, we're pretty good at that, and we're able to have that information verified and verified on the spot in the system. So the customer will initial each, there's a checkbox next to each data element, and they will initial each one and sign that form attesting that all this information is accurate. When we do provide that form to the customer, we let them know that any information that's on this form is associated to their driver record as well as the information for the voter registration process, as we are the conduit of information for the Secretary of State and the county clerks. This confirmation sheet is retained for DMV records. It's not given to the customer to take with them. They do the verification. We place that with their driver's license application, any scanned documents we have that we retain for the driver's license issuance. We do hold on to those, that document to verify, and it does get scanned into our system to verify that if ever asked, hey, what was the situation here and what's the information presented, we can show that based on the name and date of birth documents or et cetera, we can cross-reference those documents. Once the information is validated, the technician will now validate that they observed that the customer initial each box. The technician does sign as well, and then that we advance the transaction into the actual fee payment, and we collect the fees for that for the services rendered. So it's at this point, once we collect the fee, it's at that point where a voter application number is actually assigned to that specific record. So if the record is not filtered out with those filters, those program filters, if the record's not filtered out of the AVR process, we actually assign an affidavit number, a voter registration number, if you will, an application. We assign that to that specific record based on a set of sequence numbers that provided by the Secretary of State that's automatically assigned through the, excuse me, through a programming code. So that record has now become part of a queued status, if you will. So it's not actually transmitted on a real-time basis right then and there, because we do have a lot of the verifications, name, date of birth, et cetera, that we do go through. So that queued status is placed on that record, and that record is actually kind of put off to the side a little bit while we finish the rest of the driver's license transaction. And the NOVA system, so NOVA is the, correct me, I just want to make sure I'm correct here. It's the Secretary of State's Nevada Online Voter Access System. So that's where we start talking about the actual electronic transmission of the record. So now that this record is queued up, it's actually in that pending status to go to the NOVA system. And that'll be through an overnight batch transmission, which we'll talk about here in a little bit as well. So once that record's queued, we proceed past payment. A series of documents is going to be automatically printed, and those are at the print queue of the transaction. That's the very end of the transaction. We've actually completed the transaction, and depending on the customer's situation, they may go to the camera to take pictures, or they may be done for their transaction if it's just a duplicate, whatever the case may be. That is, in theory, the end of the driver's license ID transaction. So we start handing out credit card receipts and the interim document that's provided to them for while they wait for their new card in the mail, etc. But we also provide them with some of the voter registration documents that we are required to provide. One of them being the AVR confirmation receipt. So they've already verified their information using on the DLID confirmation sheet during the transaction to make sure the information is accurate. However, the AVR confirmation receipt is actually the form that we provide them, no signature required. It's just a form we slide across the counter and inform them that this is the information that is currently queued up and will be provided to the Secretary of State through the electronic transmission AVR process. The other form for AVR purposes is the options form. So this AVR options form, and this is where the customer's time is to be able to indicate their preference. And those preferences are essentially do nothing. So they don't have to do anything with that form whatsoever. They can opt out of the AVR process, or they can actually select their party affiliation for the DMV to transmit as well. So let's talk about those three options a little bit. First one being do nothing. So if somebody's currently registered to vote in Nevada, and regardless of party preference or no party preference at all, if they're currently in the voter registration system and they do absolutely nothing with this form, they just take it with them, that's totally okay. We're still going to transmit the information that's currently queued as is, and that information will go to the county clerk. The only type of update that'll happen on the county side, as far as what the DMV provides, is if there's an address change or the name change, something has changed with the personally identifiable information, there is no change to the customer's current party selection, as we won't transmit that. So what happens is on the DMV side is if we have no party affiliation that's attached to this AVR record that's been created, we submit a registrant left blank, and that registrant left blank goes to the county clerk to indicate that the customer did not provide us with a party affiliation selection. The second option is the opt-out, and that's pretty self-explanatory. The customer can take that AVR options form. So this is where one of the requirements and provisions of the AVR petition was we had to place these red boxes in all DMV field services offices. So most of these boxes are placed by the exits. A lot of offices have multiple doors that you can come in and out. So some of those, like the metro offices in Las Vegas, have multiple doors. They're usually strategically placed on kind of the common flow of traffic where the most traffic goes out the door. So that way it is very visible. So every customer has the opportunity to provide these forms. If they want to opt out of AVR or select a party, we want to capture that information. So we want to make sure they see these boxes. They're I would say about your standard mailbox height. It looks like a post office box right outside the post office, actually, if you haven't seen one. So they're pretty obvious where they are, and the technicians obviously forward them there as well, so they are aware that it exists. So what will happen is if we retrieve the forms on a daily basis, some offices do it hourly depending on the flow of customers. If we empty the red box and we have a stack of forms, there's barcodes on these particular forms. Those barcodes are associated to that record and that record only. So I could scan this barcode 2 years from now, and it'll pull up that specific record in our system, even though that transaction is already processed and it's long gone and it's been archived in our system. So those barcodes are specific to that one record, that one applicant for that one specific transaction. So if we scan that barcode and opt out is the preference that is selected on the options form, that barcode once scanned in our system, we'll pull up the AVR screen that the technician used to enter all the information previously. The technician will select an opt-out checkbox inside that window. At that point, that queued record that we talked about a little while ago, that queued record actually will be removed from the queue and no transmission will take place. So the affidavit number that was originally assigned to that record doesn't ever get transmitted, that the information doesn't get transmitted, and it just becomes an opt-out process, and we have no history of that, except in our system showing we checked opt-out on April 1st of 2022, if you will. On the other side of that, if the customer does say, I want to select a party, and they drop the form into that box, we empty that, we scan the same exact barcode, does the same exact process electronically through our system, pulls up that record. We actually have a drop down in that window that we can go and select the customer's party affiliation based on what they put on the form. And then once we select that party, we save it in our system. The queued record will then be updated to include that party affiliation. So now we have the total package ready to transmit to NOVA, which is through the Secretary of State and on to the county clerks with the party that the applicant selected. Something to note on the AVR options form, one of the things that was brought up when the working group was working to get AVR implemented is, what do we do if we're unclear on what the customer's expectations are of the form and they make multiple selections, they chose a party and opt out, or they chose multiple parties? It was decided that the DMVs not to get involved in that conversation. Chances are the customer's long gone before we actually see that form and we retrieve it out of the red box. So we're not able to have that conversation for clarification. So we actually treat it as if the customer did nothing. We retain that form for our records, just like we do with the other driver's license and application documents. We retain that form for our records, and then we still transmit the information with the same premise of the customer did nothing, as if they didn't drop the form at all. We'll just transmit the information with no party attached, or we won't opt them out if that was the preference, if that's truly what they wanted, because we weren't able to make a clear distinction of what their choice was. So that's the AVR options form. That is only provided to applicants that are actually considered eligible based on the programmatic filters. So if a customer has, we'll say, indicated that they are not a US citizen, we select that in our system. A programmatic filter kicks in that will automatically remove them from the AVR process. It has no bearing on their actual driver's license transaction whatsoever, but it will remove them from the AVR process, and no record gets queued. At the end of the transaction, when the AVR options form and the AVR confirmation receipt actually print, those won't print. We print it's a document, and we're required to provide this literature in either English, Spanish, or Tagalog, based on population percentages for those specific languages. So we provide and it's not a rejection letter, it's actually a receipt of non-inclusion, if you will, into the AVR process. And that is simply an informational document. There's nothing to sign, nothing that they have to do with the form or take action. It just informs them that they were not included in the AVR process, and based on the information provided. If they have questions regarding AVR eligibility and voter registration eligibility in general, they can actually take that form, and then there's a generic contact number, or we provide the website to the Secretary of State's website for registration, so they can actually get more information on how to become eligible, or why they may have been rejected. And that's essentially it for our in-office transactions. All that information is archived in our system. We take all those documents. Once we do pull that the AVR options form, if provided out of the red box, we do locate the driver's license application and the information provided during the transaction. We do retrieve that and marry those documents up to make sure that information stays together at all times. So for auditing purposes, or if ever asked for research purposes, we're able to say, here's all the documents presented, and here's the AVR information presented, etc. As far as back office and the MyDMV portal transactions, that process is a little bit different because we don't have a customer in front of us to provide an AVR options form, to provide the receipts, etc. So when the AVR was implemented on the DMV perspective, we built this transactions into our MyDMV portal and back office transactions. Back office does use the same system, but has slightly different workflows as the in-office DMV staff does. So the only real difference is the customer can actually indicate their party affiliation if they choose, or select opt-out at that point in time. So it is part of the actual transaction in progress, and they can actually take that action out at that specific point in time. Outside of that, the processing in the transaction is the same, like I mentioned. The windows are mostly the same. We do have a couple different ones because obviously the customer not being there, we have to verify that information, sometimes remotely, et cetera, email or phone. But the My DMV portal transactions are completed solely by the customer. There is no DMV interaction with those like it is with with the back office and in-person transactions. So much like doing nothing with the AVR options form, if somebody's on My DMV and doesn't select a party affiliation or doesn't opt out, that record is queued up the same way with just the shell information for the personal information. And if they do opt out, it removes them from the even being placed in the queue for a voter registration application. The last thing is the applicant, once the applicant finishes a My DMV transaction, that when they finish that, that's when it actually gets queued and placed into the NOVA transmission to batch process. And that batch process generally runs somewhere, it's the next day. So it always runs daily. So that way, if we're having people, customers doing confirmations and transactions, et cetera, on the My DMV portal over the weekend when the offices are not open, we can still do that daily transmission. So those daily transmissions happen usually somewhere between 2 and 6 a.m. It just depends on NOVA downtime, DMV downtime, and there's a schedule built into the system. So when those transmissions happen, a transmittal report is generated on a website that was provided, and then we can actually work with the counties on if records are missing, if they see transmissions but they're not on the transmittal report, or they're on the transmittal report but they don't see transmissions. We can actually work together to find out, oh, NOVA was down, our DMV system was down, et cetera. So we want to make sure we're having that collaborative communication. And since AVR is only done during DLID transactions, the DMV is unable to update a voter registration record. So this is something to note because the DMV does get this question a lot. Can I just update my voter registration record with you guys and you guys transmit it? Well, based on AVR and the federal law with a driver's license application serving as a voter registration application, those processes are one and the same. So it has to be done during a driver's license ID application transaction. So if we do get customers in office that ask, I want to register to vote, we do have paper applications, or we can refer them to the Secretary of State's website to get the most updated information, and they can even register online with them. So we make sure we communicate the expectations for those that we aren't able to assist with because they're not doing a DLID transaction. And lastly, something
I'm sorry. Continue.
Oh, you're fine. Lastly, and I'm wrapping up here, one thing I think worth noting is because it does everything we just discussed, everything that is currently in place today, Assembly Bill 432 passed during the 2021 legislative session actually does have provisions that go into effect in January of 2024 that does remove a lot of those processes I just mentioned. One of the main ones being that red box that's in each office. So essentially what AB 432 would do, and this is kind of forward thinking, we're still waiting to work with the Secretary of State, and just wait for that day to come, work with the counties, et cetera. But it removes the AVR options form. It removes the AVR confirmation receipt, those processes, as far as them having to take action in the DMV office. We will still give them a receipt to verify information, but we will every record gets transmitted based, if they're not automatically filtered out, and these are just high level discussions that we're already having. But every record will be transmitted as is, and then the county clerks will handle the party affiliation or the opt-out process, et cetera. There's still a lot of work to be done and a lot of conversations to be had there, but the provisions in AB 432 that's currently pending are kind of geared towards changing the DMV's perspective of the AVR process. With that being said, that's the end of my presentation. Madam Chair, I am available for any questions any of the members of the committee may have regarding the DMV's perspective.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Martin. We're going to ask that you stay with us for a little bit because part of this agenda item is also Ms. Carmen presenting. So Ms. Carmen is the Assistant Registrar of Voters from Washoe County, also presenting on Zoom, and also not any meeting materials. And I say that just because often members in the public start scrambling and looking for them and feel that they're missing it, so that's why I'm mentioning it. So, Mr. Martin, if you could just stay with us, and then at the end of this agenda item, we'll ask questions for either or both presenters. So, Ms. Carmen, when you're ready, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Miller. My name is Heather Carmen, and that's HeatherCarmen, and I'm the Assistant Registrar of Voters for Washoe County. And I'm here to discuss the ABR process as it reflects on the clerk's or county's side. So prior to the launching of automatic voter registration, there was a working group and a steering group that was formed in order to we met for several months along with the DMV, Secretary of State, various other counties and clerks and other stakeholders, just to make sure that we were going to get this process launched on January 1st of 2020 with as very little issues as possible. So it's, as I said, it launched on January 1st, 2020. In Washoe County, during the 2020 calendar year, Washoe County processed a total of 73,782 automatic voter registration records. Of that, 48,507 were already existing voters that received either some updates to their address, or we just received confirmation of their current information on the voter registration rolls. We received 25,275 new voters in that year, and 12,991 were individuals where we received information that the registrant left blank, that they didn't pick a party. In 2021, we received a total of 93,354 automatic voter registration records. We received 69,312 existing updates. So we already had these registered voters on our rolls. These were for updates. And then for new voters for that year, it was 27,042. And for the registrant left blank, it was 15,944 for our county alone. So Washoe County, we receive approximately 5,000 automatic voter registration transactions in a month that we are processing. Through a dedicated internet portal, we obtain daily transmission sheets of our voter registration applications to ensure what is being transmitted from DMV to the state and down to the county level, that we have received all of those applications that were pushed through the system. So when you complete a covered transaction with the DMV and do not opt out of being a registered voter, the following day is when we receive that information in our import table on our election management database software. In the beginning, this was a very manual process for our county, having to manually cross-check each individual import into our table across the transmission sheet. So we learned that we had to get with our technology services to better and make it more quicker for us. So they've made an Excel spreadsheet and a SQL program to go through and verify that we did receive what's on the transmission versus in our import table. So then that way we didn't have to have somebody physically look at each and every single record. It also helps us to double check afterwards to confirm that no records disappeared from being imported or into our voter registration rolls, or that didn't get transmitted from the DMV. And we do have the ability that if we are missing something off of that transmission sheet, we can ask Department of Motor Vehicles through this a dedicated email through the Secretary of State's office. We need a transmission of this application number, this person's name, and we get it the very next day. For ABR purposes, our database, our import table, our voter registration rolls, it's very strict. It's only the street index that is in there only allows for precincted residential addresses. For ABR purposes, we loosened that, but only at the import table level, not by the time that they actually hit the voter registration rolls. This way, some unconventional addresses for individuals do come in. However, they get stopped before they actually get imported and become an actual registered voter. We do send them correspondence if their address is not a legitimate residential address to get one, because individuals can get a driver's license and put a mail service address on there, and you can't register with that. So we do have to reach out to those individuals before they become active on our voting rolls. We do occasionally receive automatic voter registration applications from other jurisdictions, such as Story County, because the addresses, they might have a Sparks address when they're really Story County. We do have a secure means of being able to forward that information on to the correct county clerk. For Washoe County, that only happens a couple of times within a week. And that's not a very frequent problem for us. We did have a situation where parties were changed to other, and we did send out correspondence to all those individuals, letting them know so that they can make sure that their party was correct. We also do that for individuals that have the registrant left blank. We send them out correspondence saying you did not choose a party. If you do not choose one, you'll remain nonpartisan. And then they respond to that, and then we go ahead and update their record. So DIMS, our election database system, we're the only county that uses it. It's 30 years old. So with the top-down system that should be in place here, coming up soon, it'll make it a lot easier for our county when it comes to matching up existing voters. There are times where an individual will end up potentially having duplicate voter registration applications in our system, but we have two different processes to verify that we don't have duplicate voters on the voting rolls, and then we make sure to merge them. But again, a lot of the stuff that we have to do, it's significantly, there's a significant human intervention with the process on our end at this point in time. And if staff's not paying attention to the fact that this person was already existing and had a particular party affiliation and they merged, they could potentially leave that person nonpartisan. And so it's very important when our voters receive their voter notification card to verify that their information is correct, including their party. So the registrant left blank is our highest volume of correspondence when it comes to automatic voter registration. We send out about 1,000 letters a month that need to be scanned and attached to the voter record, and even the returns need to be scanned and attached to their record. So with automatic voter registration, yes, we've had a few hiccups, but I believe overall it has been a very good process. And I can only see it getting better once we have our top-down system. And that's all that I have for my presentation today. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Ms. Carmen. And with that, we will open it up for questions. So again, just to remind members that this is existing law, so this, and for the community that's watching, and so we're not retrying bills or replicating bill hearings, but asking questions specific to the presentations that pertain specifically to updates and process of implementation. So with that, members, do we have any questions? Assemblywoman Carlton.
And thank you, Madam Chair. So for the DMV, I appreciate the information, but without actually seeing the forms, it's very difficult for me to understand what you were actually talking about, because a number of us have not had to go renew our licenses for a while, so I've not seen those. So if it would be possible, Madam Chair, if the DMV could provide some documents so that if a constituent calls me and says they're having a problem with something, I actually see the form and understand where it is. We found in the past that things look very user-friendly to those of us that do it every day, but they're not very intuitive for folks who only have to go register or renew their driver's licenses. And in some cases, it's 8 years now that you can have a driver's license. So I think I'd like to understand these forms a little bit better to make sure that if I have a senior call me and say they can't navigate this, I can see what they're seeing.
And so if you could just provide that to, yes, go ahead.
Well, I'll say, Madam Chair, through you, yes, absolutely. This is Thomas Martin for the record. I can get some redacted templates of those that are generated from our system directly and provide those to the committee.
Thank you. Any additional questions, members? Senator Ganser?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a couple questions. The first for the DMV, I've gone through the process with my kids of getting driver's licenses and so forth. And I do remember the verification. So you take in the information and then you provide a sheet, you set it on the counter, the text set on the counter, so you can make sure it's got the right address and other information. And so it sounds like we're not going to be doing that anymore, but I was thinking that form actually had information that was related to the driver's license, just not voter registration. So have you eliminated that check? Is that what to verify that everything that was just put into the database was correct?
Madam Chair, through you to Senator Ganser, this is Thomas Martin for the record.
You may go direct, Mr. Martin. You may go direct.
Thank you. Senator Ganser, we have not eliminated that check. No, in that process, even with the potential changes coming from AB 432, that verification will still be in place for the customer to verify all that information. That form, just high level, thinking off the top of the head, probably won't change much, if at all, with these changes coming up, just to make sure we are providing that customer that opportunity to verify the data that's provided.
Thank you. I misunderstood that. So thank you for that answer. And then for Ms. Carmen, you had talked about you mail about 1,000 postcards or requests because people haven't checked any box, and so they automatically default to nonpartisan. Are they able to? Do they need to get back to you via mail, or can they go online and pull up their voter registration to register for a certain party if they've defaulted to nonpartisan? Can't hear.
Voters. Oh. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. When we send out those letters, the registered left blank, they have the opportunity to either reply to that, or they may go ahead and re-register online through the Secretary of State's NOVA system.
So just to follow up, so you just said re-register or update their registration. So are they not registered if they get that letter, or are they just defaulting to nonpartisan?
They are a registered voter. Assistant registrar. They are a registered voter. They will be active and in our system. Even if they don't reply to the registrant left blank letter, they'll be left nonpartisan. So they are active, and if they do respond, we update their party, or if they wanted to, they can update their voter registration online. It basically does put them through the process of re-registering, but again, they're still active. There's never a point in time that they become inactive or a canceled registered voter.
And so that synchronization when they are updating it online, even though they're going through the re-registration process, do they put in a number or something to make sure it's not duplicated, so that those records are still one active voter registered?
Carmen, Assistant Registrar. That ends up happening on our end. When it gets put into our import table, our database needs to search for the existing record and then marry those two together. If our system does not find the existing record, which it does happen occasionally, we run a report internally to look for duplicates to merge them. Plus, we also get a nightly report from the Secretary of State's office that reports when we have duplicate active registered voters on our database so that we can merge them immediately.
Okay, and then do you expect when you have the top-down system that duplication may be eliminated? Because it seems like you're having to do a few things manually.
Heather Carmen, Assistant Registrar. Yes, I do believe that once we have this centralized top-down system, some of the issues that we experience will definitely be mitigated and we won't have to deal with them.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Members, any additional questions? Assemblywoman Dickman?
Thank you, Madam
I'm
Chair.
sorry, I can't see you right now. Do you have a question?
I do, please. Thank you.
Please proceed.
So my question is for probably both of you, but how easy is it or how possible is it for someone's party affiliation to be changed through this process without their knowledge? Or because I've heard so much anecdotal, so many stories of people who say my registration was changed when I went to the DMV and I did not know it until I checked online.
Madam Chair, this is, sorry, go ahead.
Assemblywoman Dickman, Heather Carmen, Assistant Registrar for the record. I figured I would maybe, take this question, seems how I feel that it kind of, it's dealt with on our end. The Department of Motor Vehicles, when they send us their automatic voter registration information, yes, it becomes our responsibility to make sure that if the voter is already existing, active, or even inactive in our voter registration database, that if a duplicate is made on our end, that when we merge them, that we maintain their party affiliation. That's when potential issues come up, is when we do receive the duplicate record. We have to do our due diligence to make sure that we are maintaining their party affiliation. One of the benefits of our system is that we do have a transaction log, so we can go back and actually see when we merge something, did we make a mistake? And go, yes, this person, we should have not made them nonpartisan, they should have been Republican. Then another voter notification card goes out. I can't stress how important it is to check your voter notification card, check online with your voter registration to make sure that, if you've gone down to DMV and done a covered transaction, it's been updated. I haven't seen a significant amount of party changes that it has been really brought to my attention. I do know that it has happened occasionally. So I know that the DMV, when a person is down there, it's their responsibility, I guess, to go ahead and check a party. But again, it's also our responsibility to make sure that if they're already existing, that we maintain that party affiliation for them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you, Assemblywoman. Any additional questions from members? I actually have a brief question, a few quick brief questions for Mr. Martin, actually. And this is related, Assemblywoman Carlton had brought it up about the process when we're applying for our driver's license. So can you just respond just briefly? First, what is, I believe it was extended, but what is the required date that everyone needs to have a real ID driver's license? We know that's a specific type of driver's license. When must everyone have transitioned over to a real ID?
Madam Chair, Thomas Martin for the record, Nevada DMV. The Real ID extension, the date, I believe, and I know it's May of 2023. I do not know this. I want to say it's May 7th, but I can't say that for certain. But I do believe it's May of 2023.
May of 2023, okay.
Here's Sean Sever here from the DMV. I'm here too. The date is actually May 3rd, 2023.
Wow, May 3rd, 2023. Okay, I know I had mine in 2017 when I had to renew my physical license. And so Assuming, just like myself, 2017, I heard that I learned about this new Real ID, and I had the option. I didn't have to do the Real ID. But again, the fact that this would extend how long I needed to come back into the DMV and get a physical license, I, of course, opted to do the Real ID at that point. So how many of Nevadans that are coming in for a driver's license are actually doing the Real ID? Or are we just at that time where now we're a year out, you literally have to? Do we have any idea of the percent of people that are getting the Real ID?
Madam Chair, Thomas Martin for the record. Right now, I know our current percentage, and this is including existing, and that's also those who come in, but our current percentage right now is hovering right about a 70% Real ID compliance rate. It is not a requirement still, and even moving forward with the Real ID federal date, that federal compliance is essentially for commercial air travels, etc. The DMV will still offer those standard licenses that are marked not for Real ID purposes. And like I said, right now that's about a 70% clip of compliant cards.
Okay, and what is the so when people are getting their Real ID, that's when the automatic voter registration is kicking in, correct?
Madam Chair, Thomas Martin for the record, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and with that, we'll go ahead and close the agenda items for one. Okay, please make sure you let me know sooner. Assemblyman Matthews?
Thank you, Chair. Quick question for Ms. Carmen. Assemblywoman Dickman, I think, asked how common it is for somebody's registration to be changed without their knowledge, and I think your response was along the lines of it doesn't happen that often, it happens occasionally. If one wanted to find out how often it has happened, I'm not expecting that you would necessarily know that answer today, but if I'm wondering if that is something that the Registrar of Voters Office does catalog so that if somebody wanted to find out, looking back, precisely how many times it has happened, is that information that could be ascertained if needed? Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Matthews. Heather Carmen for the record.
Ms. Carmen? Ms. Carmen, we can't hear you. There
must be a delay. I apologize. Thank you, Assemblyman Matthews, Heather Carmen for the record. I can actually check to see if we do catalog that. I am uncertain if we do maintain that as a data point for AVR coming in. So I can look into that and provide that information to you at a later time.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we will go ahead and close agenda item 4. We will open up, and Ms. Carmen will be presenting on another agenda item later, so we'll see her again. We will open up agenda item 5, which is an overview of the voter registration list maintenance, including the comparison of records between the Secretary of State and the State Registrar of Vital Statistics pursuant to Assembly Bill 321. We have Mr. Mark Velashin, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections from the Secretary of State Stephanie Herrera, Program Officer 3 from the Office of Vital Records, Division of Public and Behavioral Health, Department of Health and Human Services. And so Mr. Velashin and Ms. Herrera will be presenting via Zoom and will use a PowerPoint presentation. So with that, Mr. Velashin and Ms. Herrera, when you are ready, please proceed.
Excellent. Good morning, Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Mark Velashin, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections for the record. I'll share my screen now. 8 slides, only of which I believe 5 are actually information. So I promise not to alter your timeline much further. Okay. The topic, again, is simply the agenda item as mentioned by staff, and I'll be talking about this with Ms. Herrera today. Okay, to start with an overview of our statewide voter registration list maintenance processes. First and foremost, this is a process that is directed by federal and state law. This is not something, again, that we really have a lot of flexibility or options to do one way or the other. This is the process is intended so that there's uniformity and non-discrimination throughout the voter registration process. specifically to ensure that you're not disenfranchising anybody and to ensure that all eligible voters are able to again, take part in this important civic duty. The federal and state laws, and I'll talk about some of them here very briefly, again, specify how and when a voter may be removed. And I think that's really the most important part. There's a lot of discussion nowadays about what could or should happen, but the simple fact of the matter is that from the state and county election official point of view, there's a very strict requirement for certain actions to happen or not happen that are defined in federal and state law. You may have heard of the 90-day blackout period. This is also a federal requirement before a federal election. That 90-day blackout period is a period of time prior to an election where these sorts of list maintenance plans cannot occur, specifically to risk or to not risk disenfranchising an individual who is about to update their voter registration prior to an election. There are still some activities that can occur in there, and one of them actually is something that we'll talk about here in a few moments with the Office of Vital Records. The federal requirements, I've got them listed here, National Voter Registration Act, as well as the Help America Vote Act. I specified the section and subsection in those bills specifically, again, so that if individuals have any question on them, but they are echoed very closely in our NRS 293, 540, and 541. Talk about when a county official is allowed to conduct list maintenance, what activities must be taken. And 293, 530 actually talks about the process. Again, it's very heavily regulated and controlled to make sure that there's, again, uniformity across the board. Spoiler alert, by the way, again, the Secretary of State and all 17 counties do comply with federal and state laws regarding list maintenance. There is, again, across from all 17 counties, a full recognition that this is an important process for a number of reasons. First and foremost, again, no one is removed arbitrarily, right? The importance of not disenfranchising somebody can't be understated. There's merit in conducting list maintenance. And again, every one of your county election officials recognizes the importance of keeping clean voter rolls. Everything from the fiscal side of it. A mail ballot, for example, that goes to a voter who is not part of the state anymore is wasted money for the county and state. And that's something that we all take very seriously. All the way through to making sure that if an individual is out of state or is no longer an eligible Nevadan voter, again, making sure that they're off our lists, because ultimately that's going to result in a cleaner and more smoothly run election. So this is something, again, we all take very seriously and are in strict compliance with the federal and state laws. So what exactly is our statewide voter registration list? Well, it's a list maintained at the state and it's built daily. And what do I mean by that? So each of our 17 county clerks and registrars has their own county database. Every night through a secure system, those county clerks and registrars send information to us at the state. We aggregate that information and then immediately conduct certain validations and checks. Those checks include reviewing the DMV unmatched list. If someone who is registered does not appear on the DMV matched, if maybe their registration that came in yesterday lacks some of the required information, that gets flagged to the clerk and registrar. We look for duplicates. It's not against the law to be registered to vote in multiple counties, but we check this every single day. And what we do is we look to see the date of the registration. If somebody was registered to vote in Douglas County, say on January of 2010, and then a new registration that's a duplicate for that individual appears in Carson City in January of 2022, we notify both clerks immediately when that pops up, again, as part of this daily process. And the clerks conduct that activity, again, pursuant to NRS 293-530, which includes sending out a postcard notification to both addresses to confirm, it appears that you are at this address now. Please let us know, again, so that we're validating where they're at and can cancel the older, inactivate the older registration. The vital statistics information that we get from vital records, again, we'll talk through that in detail here in a moment, so I won't go into that now, but that's also checked daily to ensure that any individual who has passed away is also removed in a timely manner. There's other routine maintenance activities that occur as well at the county level. Everything from information that we get from the post office, voters that come in or even contact the registrar or clerk's office and say, I've moved from Carson to Story, please update my registration. Someone that says I'm moving overseas, please go ahead and cancel my registration. Those sorts of activities are also incorporated in a daily basis. As you can imagine, there's a disparity in what exactly that looks like numbers wise. A county like Eureka with about 11,000 registered voters, 1,100 registered voters has significantly less of those sort of maintenance activities than say Clark County or Washoe County. The mailing of the National Voter Registration Act confirmation notices also, again, are sent out routinely to make sure that, again, we're validating if there's a question that comes up in regards to a voter's registration. And then I mentioned other routine maintenance as needed. The Department of Corrections notifies the county clerks in the state when an individual has been convicted of a felony and has started their incarceration, and then the clerk again gets notified so that they can cancel that individual's registration as well. There's the Electronic Registration Information Center project reports. Every other month, we receive a number of reports. Again, these are comparing our information to 33 other states and DC across the country. They also are another opportunity to identify individuals that may have a need for list maintenance. Again, nothing is done. We don't receive a report, whether it's from Eric or otherwise, and just instantly act on it and inactivate a registered voter. That we have to follow that federal and state process. But again, in some cases with the ERIC reports, when it comes to the deceased members, there might be redundancy. Frankly, I'm fine with that. I would rather have some redundancy than risk missing anybody. They also identify duplicates, whether it's in-state as well as duplicates in other states. Any of the other state members of ERIC, if, for example, Louisiana has an individual that appears that is also registered to vote here in Nevada, again, very similar to the process I described earlier. Both states would send out a postcard notification to confirm, to give that voter an opportunity to say, no, I'm still here. That's not actually right. The Louisiana one was an accident or some sort of error, so we can confirm if an individual is still here and eligible to vote or not. Again, the national change of address process is something similar. We receive a lot of notifications through the NCOA process as well. Again, but Nevada, we are a very transient state. There are many folks who move repeatedly throughout the year. So this is another opportunity for us to review and examine and consider updating an individual's registration, but is also not something that we act on immediately. And then there's a non-voter notice that we send out across the state each odd-numbered year following an election cycle. These are mailed out to individuals who have no vote registration activity in the previous years, or who have, again, not taken part in updating their registration over 2 federal election cycles. An inactive voter, again, here in our state, it cannot be canceled until they have not participated or updated their registration for 2 federal general elections. So in regards to what we do with the Office of Vital Records, specifically requested for part of this presentation, and I'll ask Ms. Herrera to join me on this part of it. So first and foremost, again, back in 2008, NAC 293-464 was established. You can see that the date there when that regulation went through. It directed the comparison of the statewide voter registration list with information maintained by the State Registrar of Vital Statistics. Since then, again, that collaboration has continued. When I was appointed as the Deputy for Elections in October of 2020, we recognized that this collaboration between the Secretary of State and the Office of Vital Records maybe could be revisited, given the amount of turnover we had, and I suspected there as well. I reached out to Ms. Herrera, and she confirmed they've had a number of turnovers over the past few years, and this was something that we both felt very seriously about and decided to make a priority. So starting in early 2021, we began a process where we reviewed our processes and data. How do we transfer information? What exactly are we transferring? How frequently are we transferring everything? Again, this is part of the Secretary's holistic review of everything that we do to make sure that it's being done as best as it can. And if there's room for improvement, to identify that and to act upon it. I'll tell you from the get-go, Ms. Herrera helped clarify a lot of my own misunderstandings in this process. I was under the impression that when an individual passed away, within about 24 to 48 hours, perhaps, that death certificate would be signed. Maybe another 96 hours after that, it would be here to the Secretary of State, and we would be able to act on it. And that would really be about the extent of the process. But she, quite frankly, opened my eyes to the process. And Ms. Herrera, do you mind taking a moment to maybe talk through some of the timelines and friction points that you come across?
Yes, thank you. So there's a lot of moving parts that goes into the death record process. We deal with funeral homes, physicians, coroners, families, and then of course our office. We've been striving to get better and better and provide a lot of assistance to our users and communities. And in 2021, approximately 67% of the records were actually completed within 10 days. 94% of those were completed within 30 days. So, like I said, we continue to strive for those numbers to be better. So, yeah, that's, like I said, we've been working really closely with the Secretary of State to ensure they are getting all of those records in a timely manner.
Thank you, Ms. Ferreira. And I think she highlights a very important point. Even with 90% being completed within that period of time, I believe she said 30 days, that's still 10% that maybe take a little bit longer, where we're waiting for family members to provide Social Security numbers, or there's multiple amendments in some cases to those death certificates before they're finalized. That's important for really two reasons. One, again, from an election official standpoint, we cannot act upon or cancel a voter's registration unless we know for sure that we have certain information and that certified letter from the registrar's office, the registrar of vital records, that is. And second, 10%, again, even 1% of the number of individuals who pass annually, that's a lot of people ultimately. And I know that those individuals will likely contact many of you expressing concern. Our goal at the Secretary of State's office, and I know it is echoed there over at Vital Records, is to make that number as small as possible. Frankly, one deceased individual on our voter rolls, again, is while maybe unfortunate if they pass, in the days leading up to the election, really our goal, though, is to keep it as absolutely clean as possible. And to that effect, the 90-day blackout period that I mentioned earlier does not apply to deceased individuals. Of course, we have to be certain that it is the right individual who we are going to cancel, and we can't risk that. But that is an important part of the process. So again, beginning in early January 21, Mr. Ferreira and I, as we were part of this discussion and recognizing the transience of not only our state, but also of our staff collectively, we decided to put it into writing and started developing a $0 contract. That initiative was further solidified through Assembly Bill 321. And in July of 2021, we actually signed the $0 contract that we can provide as well. But I also want to reassure you that this was not something that we signed a contract and said, all right, we're done. Let's go look at other things and try to find other things to do. We've continued those discussions and continued our collaboration between the two agencies. And in fact, are continuing discussions about how we can improve this $0 contract, possibly even with modifications or changes after this 22 election cycle. And what exactly do I mean by that? So we're going to continue looking and have continued looking at the process and what information is transmitted from the Office of Vital Records to the Secretary of State. We've identified a number of additional ways that we can continue to clean up and improve these processes that again, Ms. Ferreira and I have been working on even as recently in the last couple of weeks. In reference to updates to the $0 contract, potentially in January of 2023, you'll notice when you see the contract, for example, one of the stipulations called for a transfer of a calendar year rolled up. Again, building additional redundancies. We want multiple opportunities to make sure that an individual has been properly removed from our statewide voter registration list. At the time when we presented it, again, I think it was a little bit ambitious. We said that there would be within, I think, the month of January, we would get an annual roll-up of everyone who had passed in the previous 12 months. In the previous calendar year. We've realized now, again, recognizing some of the realities of what goes on, that it's probably more appropriate to extend that from January to something closer to about March or April, or possibly even May. But we're looking closely at that timeline to see if that, again, can match reality so that it's an achievable timeline and not just an unrealistic goal. And then lastly, we're talking about adding a process for incomplete records. When an individual passes and perhaps what's the process to ensure that if there are, for those, again, rare situations where it might take multiple months before a death certificate is finalized, how do we make sure that we're capturing that as well? Is there other information that we can look at, or maybe other information that we could try to pull from to confirm the identity of the individual? I will tell you that many of the clerks and registrars and their staffs look at obituaries, watch the news. If they hear about an unfortunate passing of an individual or a longtime community member, they look at their registration list to see if that individual is on there so they can possibly act upon it. And again, the cleanliness will and I guess we'll pause there for the vital records, but I do want to stress, and this is the last part of the statewide voter registration list maintenance presentation. The next slide is simply the questions. I do want to stress that the overall process, including the aspects I just talked about with vital records, will continue to enhance or be improved rather in the coming 24 to 48 months. Which might seem odd. I just said we're following federal and state law to the fullest extent possible. The processes that we're following aren't going to change, but I will tell you that what's going to change is the cleanliness of our statewide voter registration list itself, really for two specific reasons. One, the transition to a top-down registration system that we'll talk about here in a few moments, that's going to continue to improve our process. Instead of having 17 counties sending information to us on a daily basis, it then takes time for us to compare, and then there's a turnaround to get the clerks, again, provide them information, then they provide the postcard notifications. A top-down voter registration list is going to be a centralized database so that when somebody does move from one county to another, or a number of these other checks, it's going to expedite that process to identify those anomalies that need to be addressed in a much more efficient fashion. So the first one's the top-down voter registration list. And the second is, quite frankly, due to Assembly Bill 321. Over the last, think about prior to the passage of Assembly Bill 321, or really prior to the 2020 election cycle, there's no requirement for an individual to vote to be an active registered voter. There isn't. We've had individuals who are active registered voters who have been on the rolls and haven't voted in some cases for years. But there's no requirement for us to inactivate or cancel that individual's registration. In fact, if we're sending them official elections mail and they're not coming back to us as undeliverable, then there's no reason for a clerk or registrar to even question that individual's registration. But now, because of, again, Assembly Bill 321, we are going to send official election mail, sample ballots, and actual mail ballots for every election that individual is eligible to vote in. So every primary, general, special election, there will be a mail ballot. Previously, there might have been an occasional postcard notification. Someone maybe thought they got 2 of them accidentally and just discard them without thinking. Now they're going to be getting ballots. Now people are paying attention. Now, hopefully, they're aware that, again, the right answer is not to destroy or throw away that ballot that came for a previous tenant or for a loved one who has passed away, but to write return to sender on it, put it back into the mail. That is what goes back to the county election official, and that's what's going to start that clock pursuant to 293-530, where they send out the postcard, and that will result in the individuals being inactivated, and then after 2 federal general elections canceled. So again, a lot of the issues that we're seeing now and questions in regards to the cleanliness of our statewide voter registration list. One, again, we've been following appropriate federal and state laws as required, but 2, it will be continuing to get cleaner in the years and months ahead. That being said, that's all I have, and I will stand by for questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Volashin. Members, do we have any questions?
I do, Chair.
Okay, Assemblywoman?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Just a quick one on that ballot that you talked about that goes to the house and the person is deceased or they no longer live there. So if nobody marks return to sender on that and lets someone know, how will you know to take them off the voter rolls or to try to notify them, or how do you catch someone who votes that ballot?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. 2 parts to it. The first, you're absolutely spot on. If somebody does not let us know, then there will be no action taken at the state or county level in regards to that individual's voter registration. So then what do we do about those nefarious individuals who may receive a ballot and think they're pulling a fast one and try to vote it? Well, first and foremost, again, the signature verification process that ballot will go through, it's the very first thing that happens when that ballot returns to the county election official. We have not only the most current ballots that individual has voted, but all of their past history in regards to however long they've been in that county. We'll have voter registration forms, previous ballots, maybe application forms filled out at the DMV with numerous examples of signatures. Those numerous examples of signatures are what gets compared to that ballot and the signature on that envelope of that ballot. So that's, again, really one of the most effective ways that we have to be able to identify it. There are a number of other checks and balances that we look into, specifically going into the future election cycles. We're going to compare and identify addresses, for example, where there are, maybe a number of individuals registered to vote at the same household, and a number of other factors. Some of this, again, isn't things that we're necessarily going to act on, but we're going to keep an eye on, simply to increase our awareness, to make sure that, again, we're keeping our processes clean and secure as possible.
Thanks for that. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Any additional questions, members? Vice Chair Orenshaw, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chief Deputy Secretary Wolashin. That top-down voter registration system has really been kind of the holy grail for many sessions now, and we've all had a belief it'll really solve a lot of problems. Maybe I missed it, but when do you think that system will be up and running?
Thank you for the question, Vice Chair Orenshaw. Mark Wolashin for the record. I didn't mention it earlier. The next agenda item, we'll talk about it in length and some of the concerns of the timeline, but to answer your question directly, the path that we're on right now, it does not appear that we'll be able to effectively implement the top-down voter registration prior to January of 2024. But the intent is to not do it quickly, but to do it properly. So as it currently stands, I estimate prior to January of 2026.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wolashin. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes. And Mr. Wolashin, I just have a question because I know that, our number one goal is always to promote accuracy. And so with that, my question, and I understand if you don't have the exact data with you today, but if not, if you could provide that to the committee at a later time. But because I know people are concerned about this issue, can you tell us in 2020 specifically how many registered voters actually died? And then how many of those, I think it was nefarious was the term you used, how many of those showed up as that they voted?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Actually, I do have that information handy. Following the completion of the 2020 election cycle, we reviewed the documents provided by the Office of Vital Records, and one of the questions I had was, first and foremost, everyone that had died leading up to the 2020 election cycle, and even before that, I wanted to know if any of them had vote history. When we reviewed the numbers and identified there were approximately 400 individuals who had died in the previous few years that had vote history. As you can imagine, the first thing I did after that was we identified the specific dates those individuals passed, and then also looked very closely at the dates each individual county's mail ballots hit the mail stream. The idea being that if somebody mailed a ballot in and voted, or even voted in person during early voting, and then unfortunately perished in a car accident on election day or leading up to election day, again, that would be perceived as being acceptable, or at least understandable, rather, while still very unfortunate. Of those 400, there were approximately 50, and I can provide the specific numbers, where the individuals had not perished after a reasonable amount of time where they could have received a ballot. In other words, an individual who maybe the mail ballots were sent a day before they died, or possibly even as many as a few days before they died.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate that that consideration too, that and like you said, it's very sensitive, but you could have mailed your ballot and then something happened. So
right.
Thank
yes,
you.
ma'am.
Right. So thank you for that as well. Okay, with that, we will go ahead and close this agenda item. And Mr. Wolashin, I know you are staying with us for agenda item 6, which is an update on the implementation and planning of a centralized statewide voter registration database according to Assembly Bill 422. So when you are ready, please proceed.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Again, Mark Velashin, Deputy Secretary of State for Elections for the record. Again, this agenda item is specifically to talk about the implementation and planning of the centralized statewide voter registration database as directed by Assembly Bill 422 of the 2021 legislative session. To start off, again, that was the mandate. This has, as Vice Chair Orenshaw had mentioned, been something that's been in the works and there's been significant discussion about. But with the passage of Assembly Bill 422 in the 2021 legislative session, again, now it's a mandate and something that we're continuing to move forward on. The first part of this process was the recognition that we needed to conduct an assessment. This assessment was a statewide assessment, not only the Secretary of State, everything from our processes, staff, resources, capabilities, and limitations, but also down at the county levels. Again, there's a significant difference, of course, as you can imagine, between the resources available in Washoe County or in Clark County and some of our smaller rural counties. Indeed, every time I bring this up, I try to remind folks that the 15 elected officials in our counties that are not appointed registrars have multiple hats they have to wear with multiple requirements due to their constituents. And elections is but a fraction of that. And so that there was a great number of things that we asked to review. A company was selected, Gartner was selected through the routine state RFP process, and they completed their 6-month assessment in February of 2022. So what did that assessment look like? They interviewed, again, folks from across the state, county, not only the elected officials and our appointed registrars, but also numerous staff members. In many cases, as you can imagine, again, county IT staff that support the needs of an entire county and not just the elections department or that individual clerk. Numerous interviews and discussions with the Secretary of State, her staff, not only our elections division, but also our IT, really with the intent to create process maps and understand how things function. What does the as-is look like? A significant amount of requirements were gathered and a lot of discussion about capabilities. It worked out really well, frankly, that Gartner was selected because in part they have a significant experience working with the election sphere and have done this very similar sort of assessment process in other states, which I believe was part of the reason why they ultimately were selected. Again, ultimately, they organized and documented a detailed approach as well as providing a potential roadmap looking forward. So some of the pain points, and I wanted to highlight these because this slide and the next one really capture some of the concerns that were raised by our county election officials and were items that Gartner identified as being not only worthy of note, but significant risks that we have to make sure that we're careful in and address going into the transition to a top-down registration system. I won't speak in detail to all of these, certainly available for questions if there is one on any one, but you can see that some of these, again, everything from identifying the existence of provisional ballots in that process and making sure that that's incorporated, discussion about the inability as it currently stands for voters registration. And this was something that came up a moment ago in our discussion about ABR, about how the counties have independent voter registration databases. When you move from Carson to Douglas, again, it's not a long drive even between the two counties, but ultimately those are entirely separate election registration databases because they're maintained by two separate clerks. So trying to find a way to not only have it centralized, but make sure that if an individual does move, that we're able to address them. The timing, we talked about the timing and that 48-hour lag at times. Oftentimes it's 24, but again, reducing as much as possible the sort of friction and time that it takes to conduct voter list maintenance or to even just do routine actions. That will be an important thing that we need to make sure is incorporated. Confidential voters. Again, a lot of folks don't realize we have a strong confidential voter program that is set in place to make sure that individuals who want to maintain their confidentiality across the state are able to still cast their ballots in a legal manner without causing any confusion or without exposing or risking their privacy. That is also something that we take very seriously at the state and county levels and are making sure that we incorporate to this process going forward as well. Questions about candidate certifications, petitions, and recalls. Also, again, something that oftentimes folks forget is also a responsibility of the Secretary of State to oversee and administer, but certainly an integral part of Title 24. but making sure that process and the signature verifications, these activities that have to occur and are increasing, it seems, in the number of times, whether it's petitions that as folks become aware of the process for initiative and referenda and are getting involved, or a number of other types of petitions. But again, making sure that we don't leave out this extremely important part of our process either. We talked about the utilization of electronic poll books and making sure that, again, there's consistent processes. But when you think about voting systems, right, oftentimes people just picture the machine you stand in front of, or maybe where in Carson and Lander, where you put your ballot into and it enables you to vote properly that way. But there's so much more to it. There's the tabulations, there's the electronic poll books, there's the election management systems. There's all these different parts that connect into that system to make it run properly. And making sure that as it stands now, that as the counties, many of them use different brands of electronic poll books, that this system should ideally work with them, and it shouldn't create an additional fiscal burden on the counties, as we move into this transition. And then lastly, the election night reporting, the process to validate the information, to ensure that it's transmitted in a secure manner, and making sure that that's aggregated appropriately, and that, of course, that there's no errors or issues there. So the decision criteria framework that we considered as part of this assessment, we wanted to make sure that it had a functional fit, based on, again, our capabilities and limitations across the state. It's got to, whatever solution is identified, it's got to meet our requirements. It's a unique challenge because, as you well know, every state's election laws are different. So there really isn't an ability to just pull something off a shelf and then use it instantly. It's going to have to be modified, no matter what it is. Or if one was going to be created from scratch, it's going to have to match the 9 chapters of Title 24 in our revised statutes. So that, again, that was one of the biggest concerns and focuses. The cost, again, there are some unique options out there, some ideal, very interesting, rather custom fit type of solutions where individuals would program it from scratch, just build a Nevada-specific voter registration system. But in many cases, those ideas were astronomically expensive, even in just some of the initial discussions and review. So cost is something that we were keenly aware of as well. The goal is to make sure, as we talked about, that it's done right and not quickly, but also not cheap, because this is a process and an implementation of a system that needs to be used, again, ideally for a few decades at least. The state and county resources, this is also an extremely important one. As you are all keenly aware of, there are a number of vacancies at county and state positions that have been fairly difficult to fill. There's not only a challenge in getting personnel, but as other vacancies and other state agencies and areas open up, there's opportunities for county and state employees to get promoted and move into these newer, again, different positions. As that rotation occurs of vacancies being filled and new positions, new individuals moving on, there's certainly a concern in regards to the state and county resources available to allocate to this process. It's extremely important. It's essential that we get this right. But without having the right people in place, or trying to select maybe a course of action where, or a possible solution that does require a ton of time or people, the personnel and state resources and county resources is something we were also keenly aware of as part of this assessment. The time to market, there are some interesting ideas and options out there that would take 10 to 15 years to implement. That's simply not the case either. We can't, while we're going to be deliberate and make sure that we do this properly, we also are not going to be so slow and methodical that sometime, just in time for a 2034 election process, like that's simply untenable as well. So we're cognizant of and very thoughtful at the time to market. And then there's some other risks and considerations. Again, everything from the implementation, the operational risks, align with our Secretary of State's IT strategy and operations. And all of that, I think, is kind of a fancy way to say that we recognize that while this process is going on, we're still going to have to conduct elections. We're still going to be inundated by frankly, foreign and domestic cybersecurity attacks. that I thought would have peaked in, right during or maybe after the 2020 election cycle, but in many cases have not, and frankly have continued to attempt to infiltrate and cause havoc on all state systems. So these are, again, key considerations. And that is something that we also are reminded of, I will tell you, on just about a daily basis. We stay in close contact with a number of other states who are going through similar processes or going through similar transitions from bottom up to top down, or from top down of one form to top down of another. And these sorts of issues continue to come to the forefront of our attention. Incidentally, both of these articles, these are articles, and they are hyperlinks for individuals that have questions on them. You can certainly reach out to our PIO and we'll provide those links to you if you aren't able to find them. But even that second article here from, I can't say this month, last month, a few weeks ago, and this is an extremely competent Secretary of State with an extremely competent staff who is still facing challenges as part of their transition. This is something that we are keenly aware of. The public perception, again, while very important, the goal is to make sure that it's done right. Our electorate deserves it to be done right first. So it's something that we're reminded of. We reach out to other states and we continue to discuss, and we're very, very critical in how we're thinking about how can we make this better? What are we seeing? Are other states seeing friction points that we haven't considered? And if so, let's talk to them so we can find out ways to ensure this process moves forward. Excuse me. So the decision, there were ultimately three options considered for decision: procure a commercial off-the-shelf voter registration and election management solution. Specifically, again, one of a number of options that are out there. The second is to custom build. So picture the two of these. The first one maybe is buying a car that exists. The second one is maybe building a car from scratch, where you kind of know what direction you're headed, but again, it's truly a custom built solution. And then the third option, again, we've got a very capable staff and our IT staff here. Again, the Secretary of States have been involved in our IT solutions for decades, literally. We considered, is it possible or feasible to maybe build it in-house as well? After reviewing it, though, and the decision paper was provided as well, so if you do not have it in front of you, I can certainly provide that afterwards. The decision ultimately was to pursue a commercial off-the-shelf solution instead of building one custom, which ultimately would have cost too much money, or building one in-house, which, again, recognizing the aforementioned staff limitations, carried a significant amount of risk as well. So what's next? The way forward. Continuing to confirm and prioritize the project scope. Again, we have a primary creeping up on us very quickly. We've got the general election coming up in November. We've got a presidential preference primary coming up on February 6th of 2024. A third election that year as we go into a presidential election. Every election is extremely important, and everyone demands election officials' full focus, time, and effort. And that's not just the election even year cycles, but certainly there will be some ballot question type off-cycle, odd numbered year special elections as well that will warrant attention. But this, again, has to be done right and is getting our attention across the state. Part of our review and assessment, again, ultimately concluded, as I mentioned to Vice Chair Orenshaw a moment ago, in the next 12 months, it is unlikely that we are going to be able to push forward and rapidly implement a system without ending up as maybe an article as I showed before. And based on that, there's some, I think, discussion that still needs to be had going forward. So knowing that we're pursuing a commercial solution, what does that look like in a very tangible means? Right now, developing an RFP, gathering quotes prior to the 2023 session. The initial look is that likely the Help America Vote Act grant that we have now will likely not meet the full fiscal requirement of this transition project. So ultimately, through that RFP process that we're going through again with the state, exactly as we're required to, that will provide the information needed so that we can come to the 2023 legislative session and have further discussions about what exactly does come next to make sure, again, that all appropriate stakeholders are involved in that process. And then again, like I said, we're looking very critically internally at how we're doing this, what we're doing, the staff requirements that we would need going forward, because it's not just a matter, again, of a light switch. Turn on, now we're a top-down system. It's going to need sustainment, maintenance, additional, again, integration with other legislative mandates, like Assembly Bill 432, for example. So all of these things are being considered and wrapped into the process, not only looking at what solution we'll get, but also what we at the Office of the Secretary of State need to do to make sure that we're set up and the conditions are set for success. That being said, that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Volashin. Members, do we have any questions? Yes, please. Assemblywoman Carlton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if I may, I've got a couple. So going back to, the pages aren't numbered, so I'll just go summary of content, business practices, pain points to conduct elections, most counties utilizing poll books. So I'm trying to remember what session it was that, and I'm going to put my IFC halfway hat on halfway here, that we did provide funding to the different counties in order for them to be able to modernize, get poll books. Since then, I've heard there's been a number of changes, and I was just wondering, those funds that were sent out to those different counties, are they still using what was funded for them, or are they reverting back to the more antiquated ways of trying to go back to paper ballots, things along that line? And if they are doing that, has that equipment been returned to the state? Where are we with that process?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman. 2018 legislative session was the one that identified the funds that went to the counties specifically for the modernization of their voting systems and equipment. There has been a lot of discussion, exactly like you said. There's one county in particular, Lander County, has transitioned from the voting system that was purchased using the funds from that legislative session and has gone to a different one. Those systems themselves, the machines, ultimately are being, like the software gets returned to the vendor, but the machines remain at Lander County. I will tell you that I don't believe that transition is done yet, not either with Lander County, but there certainly has been a lot of discussion across other counties about transitions to and from other voting systems. But that's the information I have right now.
Okay, and thank you. And I think this committee should probably have a conversation that if we provided equipment and when the counties came and asked for help, we helped them, and now they've decided they don't want it, I believe those funds need to be returned to the state if they're not going to be used. So I think that is probably something that we'd like to have a future conversation about, Madam Chair. It's a waste of state dollars that could have gone to other issues. So moving further into the presentation, you listed a couple of articles here from different other secretaries of states that are having issues. It seems to me, and I'm not as familiar with this committee, so if I'm off base, please let me know, but top-down is probably being done somewhere correctly. So what states are doing it, and shouldn't we be talking about those states along with the states that are having problems, not just the ones that are having problems?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Mark Volashin, for the record. Yes, ma'am. The intent of this slide in highlighting those was simply to identify the risks. Believe me, we absolutely are in close contact with the numerous other states who have transitioned to a top-down system. In fact, while there's certainly merit in discussing lessons learned from states and other secretaries of state who have maybe identified some friction points, equally, we've spent, if not more time, talking to those individuals who did have success, what it looked like, what items they found, discussion points about considerations. So yes, ma'am, absolutely. We do talk and have talked to a number of other states that have done it to some level of success.
And I'd like to learn more about that. I'd like to know exactly how it's working. We don't have to recreate the wheel. Pointing out the hazards without pointing out the positives on the other side, to me, is a bit disingenuous in giving us all the information that we need as far as making decisions moving forward, especially those of us that are a little bit newer to this. I mean, I'm familiar with the issue, but not as intimately as those who have served on this committee numerous times. So not putting that information in the presentation doesn't make it as complete as I believe it should be. And I'd like to have the information on the states where it's working. so that I understand exactly the process moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Malashkin.
And so, Mr. Voloshin, can you respond in a direct, concise way to the Assemblywoman? You mentioned that there's multiple states that you're in contact with that are doing it well. How many states, which are those states that are doing well, and how many of them are you in contact with?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Mark Washington for the record. If it's okay, I can summarize that in a document and provide it to the committee upon completion.
So you don't have that present with you right now? I know last time I didn't expect and it was pleasantly surprised that you actually had that data right there accessible with you. So I was wondering if you had this data with you. So if
Yes,
again,
we've talked to Colorado, we've talked to Texas, we've talked to Washington State, we've talked to 2 or 3 others that I can't recall right now, but yes, ma'am.
okay, so you would say about 6 that you would say that they're doing it well, that it's working, it's.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The transition, again, across the country, Mark Washington for the record, everyone's does it differently. Everyone has different requirements. But yes, ma'am, states that we identified that were close enough in their systems and their models, the before and after, that we could identify some positives from. Yes, ma'am. And certainly, I apologize if I didn't cover the merits of the system and the transition to a top-down. It will absolutely benefit every one of our 1.8 million registered voters without a fraction of a doubt. But yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you for that. Vice Chair Ornschall.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Deputy Secretary Voloshin. I was looking back at the minutes from May 25th on Assembly Bill 422 before the Assembly Ways and Means Committee, and there was testimony provided by Speaker Frierson that Nevada was one of just 6 states that still has the bottom to top voter registration system. So it seemed like most of the country is top down, but there was also testimony that there was funding from a Help America Vote Act grant that could be used towards that. And I'm just wondering, has that funding been exhausted, or is it still something that the Secretary's office will be able to use moving towards trying to implement that top-down voter registration system?
Thank you for the question, Vice Chair Ornschall, Mark Washington, Director. The bottom line is yes, we intend very much so to use the Help America Vote Act grant to fulfill as much as possible of the fiscal requirements from the transition to a top-down system. Yes, sir.
A brief follow-up, Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
So then that grant's still there waiting to be used?
Yes, sir.
It's being used?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Mr. Voloshin, what is the amount of that grant? And often grants have specific dates that they must be utilized within, so could you give us the parameters of the grant, please?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Mark Washington for the record. Yes, ma'am. Approximately $6 million at my last presentation, I believe, is about as much as we have remaining. Because of the pandemic and the budget cuts, we ended up transitioning some individuals who had been covered under the grant for the general fund into the grant to make sure that we maintained our staffing levels appropriately back during the 2020-2021 cycle. But yes, ma'am, approximately $6 million. The grant, again, I don't believe there is a deadline for it. The intent for the use of the Help America Vote Act grant, though, is to focus on the improvements to the administration of federal elections. So to that end, again, a transition to a top-down system absolutely falls within its boundaries.
Okay, thank you. So that was $6 million, and I do hope that the transition of staff was permitted per the grant. Someone coming from the grant world, both federal and state, I know there's often very specific requirements on that.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Okay. Members, any additional questions? Okay, I just have one other question, Mr. Voloshin. It seemed a little, I know that the bill specifically says that this is supposed to be implemented by January 1st, 2024, yet in your presentation, it got a little fuzzy when it came to dates and possibilities and again, in any type of SWOT analysis, we often talk about the strengths and you know, the current Secretary of State's office to actually implement this effectively. So the bill says that it's should be implemented by January 1st, 2024, which is still almost 2 years away. And yet we didn't really hear an actual concrete date. So will this be implemented as required by law by January 1st, 2024?
Thank you for the question, Chair Miller. Mark Velocity for the record. That's certainly the goal, absolutely. And if it's within the realm of the possible, that will occur. The concern is the RFP process that we are going through now is going to identify the quotes. We've already identified that is going to exceed the funds available in the Help America Vote Act grant. So therefore, we're going to come to the 2023 legislative session to identify that delta between the Help America Vote Act grant and whatever else is required. That ultimately will give us, again, that would put us at 8 to 10 months for implementation to meet that statutory deadline. If that's possible, it will occur. If it doesn't seem to be within the realm of the possible, and again, this is not simply something that we will consider lightly, but if there's any, again, based on the risk, based on the resources available, if there's questions, we'll bring that to the legislature during the 23 session as well.
Okay, thank you. And I know that also required by the bill is to make a report to IFC. And I know we have an IFC meeting coming up shortly, actually next week. So we'll be able to dig in deeper at that point. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Voloshin, for your presentation and for answering the questions. And at this point, I will go ahead and close agenda item 5. With this, I believe it would be a great time if we could just maybe we only have one more agenda item before going into our public comment. So if we could just take a quick 9-minute break. I'm sure people are ready for the restroom, and if you need to bring a snack and bring it back. And then, so we'll just recess and come back right at 12 o'clock. With that, we are in recess, 10-minute break. And so Assemblywoman Dickman, I believe I see you.
Yes,
back
ma'am.
in the room?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, awesome. I now see Senator Ganser and Assemblywoman Gonzalez. Are you still with us or return to us? Yes. Awesome. So, and then we have, so we still have quorum. It is now 12:01. I appreciate, thank you everyone for coming back so promptly and on time. But I also know when anything's standing between us and lunch, yeah. So with that, not to hold anyone up, and our next presentation is agenda, we're now back in, we're not back in session. What are we back in? We're back? It's interim. We're just back, right? Okay, call to order. Okay, we're just back. The committee come back to order. We're in order. Thank you. With that, we will have agenda item 7, which is an overview of the daily operations and permitted activities at vote centers and polling places. Our presenters are, again, we welcome back Ms. Heather Carmen, Assistant Registrar of Voters for Washoe County, and Sandra Merlino, the County Clerk from Nye County. Both will be presenting on Zoom, and again, there will be no slides or any materials, so if you don't find anything. With that, Ms. Carmen, I believe you asked to present first, and please proceed when you're ready. Ms. Carmen, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Again, Heather Carmen, Assistant Registrar for Washoe County. Thank you for having me here today to give a presentation overview on polling locations. For the primary election, Washoe County will have 58 vote centers on election day that will be in-person and ballot drop-off locations. We'll be adding a few more when the general election is upon us. The number of early voting sites, we'll have 24 in-person early voting sites that will also be ballot drop-off locations. Plus, we will have 1 ballot drop-off only during early voting. We are definitely going to be promoting more of the vote center option, so that individuals know that on election day, they don't have to go to their prior precinct-specific area, and then that gives them the opportunity to go to somewhere closer. And another thing that we had deployed in 2020 was a wait-timed portal application so that our voters could go online to see what location was closest to them and approximately how long the wait is. That's going to be available for early voting and election day, so that hopefully we don't have overcrowding at a particular location, so that people can get in and get out quickly. As far as election workers to man our polling locations, we did receive numerous applications during the 2020 cycle, and we're still continuing to receive applications. And our staff is diligently going through them to see who we can place where. They're going to have to go through training. And our current election management system, being, again, as I said before, almost 30 years old, managing such large volumes has been a task for our internal staff. So responding to numerous applications has taken us a lot longer than we had anticipated. However, we have a program that we're going to be using for the first time called Poll Chief to help us manage the numerous election workers that we have applications for. It also helps us manage our polling location sites and our inventory that goes out to those sites. We do have to hire numerous on-call workers as well, as we typically do have a 25% dropout rate. So it's not only just individuals that are going to be assigned, but then we also assign on-call workers to those locations in case someone falls ill, can't do it. Then the manager or assistant manager can call upon someone from their sheet to get them out to their polling location. I also believe one of the things that you kind of wanted to hear about was the day in the life of an election worker. And this doesn't necessarily encompass all the things they do. It's kind of a brief overview. But some of the things that they're required to do is that they're required to contact the manager and assistant manager, are required to contact the other team members to set up a date and time to do a pre-setup. That is very critical because you want to make sure that you have all the equipment necessary, all the cords, the paperwork, checking the seals on the voting equipment, making sure it has been tampered with. You want to do this the day before and not wait until the day of. That way we can be contacted immediately to rectify that situation. We have a dedicated election worker hotline that is open to our election workers that can call in immediately for any issues to make sure that we're responding to them quickly. They also have the facility contact information that their polling location is, that they're at, in case they need to call somebody on staff at the location for any issues like lights go out, things of that nature. So the first day of early voting, we do ask them to show up 2 hours before voting actually starts. And this is where they're putting out all the signs, getting all the poll books set up, testing their connectivity, opening up the polls, doing chain of custody paperwork. And then then everybody is helping to get the signage up to make sure that the flow in the voting polling location is smooth. Everybody takes the oath of office, and then the polls are open and they start processing voters throughout the day. With same day registration, it has slowed down the intake process because now we're also registering essentially individuals that want to do same day registration and then conducting the part where they're signing the roster book to then to issue them their card. So that has added a little bit of time to the process. And then there's the times where the election workers may have to answer questions of the voters, or they're dealing with observers and the media. And so they're doing that throughout the day. Hopefully it's a nice, calm, smooth day, no issues. And then at the end of the night, once the last voter has cast their ballot on the tablet, that's when the process of closing up the polls starts to happen, where they go and they do a closeout report on the ICX primes, get the total number of actual ballots that have been cast on each of those voting tablets, and they compare it against the numbers in the roster book of all the signatures, and it should be a 1-for-1. And then they're filling out their closing up paperwork, and they have to reseal all the equipment back up. There's no equipment that's left unsealed. And there's also no mail-in ballot left behind at any of the polling locations. We ensure that they are brought back to our office every night, and there's a chain of custody process with that as well. And they get scanned in as received at our office the very day that we do get them. So the election equipment is secure, and then when it becomes the last day of voting for early voting, or the end of the night for election night, 2 election workers do come into our office with the critical supplies that we verify that we've received, and we go ahead and check that in. And if it's early voting, we have to leave the stuff secured until election night, where we can actually start pulling out like USB sticks and start tallying stuff. As far as electioneering, it is the responsibility of the manager and the assistant manager to keep tabs of what is happening around their polling location. We do give them this fancy piece of twine to measure the 100 feet distance marker, and then that's where they put their signage up saying no electioneering beyond this point. They are asked to periodically go out and make sure that none of that is happening, that no signs have been put in within that area, and if so, they are allowed to remove it. If they do have to deal with somebody that is just not listening to them and says, this is my right, I can be here if I want to, this is private property, in that case, the private property owner can ask them to leave. School grounds have different rules, so it really also depends on where this activity is happening on the parameters of electioneering. But we do ask our managers and assistant managers to act upon it. If they're unable to resolve the issue, we do ask them to call that election worker hotline so that we can see what further information we can do. Do we need to send out a staff member? Is the situation, does it need to be escalated to law enforcement? If it does, the election worker has a specific sheet for their polling location that has their address, whether or not it's the sheriff or the city they should be calling. It also gives them other tips on what to do to make sure that the polling location is secure. And we also provide them with a video on what to do in case of an emergency at a polling location. If something were to happen, how to power down, and if we need to reset up or redirect voters to another location. We also make sure to assign extra voting tablets, our ICX Prime voting tablets. In case something does happen, we can deploy extra ones out in the field and set up an alternative polling location. We have backup poll books in case something goes wrong with that. Seems like we always have a plan B. We've got a plan B and a plan C. And if need be, if an extreme disaster happens, we also have our coup plan to make sure that everything runs smoothly. And we do talk to our head of security and law enforcement well in advance of the election to make sure they're in place and know the hours, times, and locations for voting. And that's the end of my presentation. Hopefully I've covered everything that you were wishing to learn about. If not, I'll be happy to take your questions afterwards, after Sam. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Merlino, please proceed when you're ready.
Good afternoon. My name is Sandra Merlino, SANDRA-MERLINO, and I'm the Nye County Clerk. Heather has already provided a lot of detail on the procedures we all follow, so I won't go over those again. But if you have questions later, that's great. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Nye County. We have 2 county facilities, one in Pahrump and one in Tonopah. So we conduct our elections mainly out of the Tonopah Clerk's office. It's where all the election equipment is stored, voter registration administration takes place, and where all the mail ballots are processed. But we have 3 early voting locations: the Tonopah Clerk's office, the Duckwater Indian Reservation, and Pahrump in our community center. We also have drop boxes at those locations during early voting. We have 5 election day polling locations: Round Mountain, Tonopah, Beatty, Amargosa, and Pahrump. Same thing, we have drop boxes at those locations on election day. As you all know, Nye County is large, so our polling locations are over 200 miles apart, so that does pose a little bit of a challenge for us. But we have created both Tonopah and Pahrump. They're actually designated as vote centers, so anyone in the county can go to either of those locations to vote, which has really been helpful. We also have drop boxes in both offices in Pahrump and Tonopah for those voters who just want to drop them off in the office. We do utilize the ICX voting machines at all polling locations, as well as the welcome voter kiosks for our electronic rosters. We set up about 4 to 7 voting machines at our smaller polling locations and up to 50 in Pahrump, as well as the electronic rosters. And each polling location is equipped with 1 or 2 accessible machines for the disabled. As everyone, we have limited staff. As clerks, we have other duties besides elections. So at least during the primary, we try to hire college kids that are home, for the summer, and we hire them in office or at the polls, wherever we can get them, and that's helpful. We do experience worker shortages at smaller polling locations. We get a lot of applications to work in Pahrump, too many in fact, but unfortunately, retaining those same workers for each election is difficult. They might work one and then they don't want to work again. Training poll workers is also a little bit of a challenge. It would be great if I could hold a centralized training with videos and hands-on and everybody could attend, but the way things are, I travel to each community to hold the training. So we have a 2 to 3 hour session. It works, but it could be better. As far as the actual election day, we transport all the election equipment and supplies by truck and U-Haul to the polling locations the day before the election. We set up the machines at each stop, do a quick test to check power, date, time, etc., make sure everything is working. And then on election day and during early voting, the workers arrive early and they go through the process of checking their supplies, logging into the kiosks, opening the polls, doing their balancing, make sure everything is ready to go. Once all the checks and balances are done, they're ready to open the polls for the day. And truthfully, I let out a large sigh of relief once I hear everything is open and the first voter's gone through the process. Not that anything ever happens, but we're just always prepared for something. Either my chief or myself remain at the largest polling location in Pahrump at all times to handle complaints and other issues that arise, but we're also in close contact with the chairman at our outlying locations. They have my direct cell number as well as the number to my office, and we can generally walk them through any issues they have. If we have to travel out there, we will, but most of those locations are at least an hour to 2 hours out of our offices. So sometimes that's a little difficult. As far as the polls, some of the issues we encounter, mostly it's campaigning complaints. Sometimes it's cell phone use. People like to try to take pictures of themselves voting, the ballots and everything else. So we've had some little instances of voter intimidation in the poll lines outside, and we've always had exit poll complaints. Sometimes everybody likes to test the limits of what they can and can't do, but it's always manageable. And like I said, I'm always there or my chief is there. So usually we can control things pretty well. We always welcome observers at our polling locations. They have to sign in and acknowledge that they understand the rules. We place them in an area where they can observe everything, but they're not close enough to see voter information or anyone's ballots. But we do welcome them. And once the polls are closed on election day, the workers go back through all their checks and balances, pack up the supplies and equipment for transport. First thing early Wednesday morning, we get that U-Haul and we pick up the equipment at all polling locations and transport it all back to Tonopah. But all of the results, anything that's sensitive, the printers and everything else, those are transported that night. They're never left in the polling locations. It's usually the actual election equipment that is sealed is left in the smaller locations. But in Pahrump, we pack up everything and put it in the U-Haul that night, lock it up and put it in the sheriff's office Sally Port so no one can get to any of that. As far as emergency preparation, we've only had minor things like power outages. What we normally do is shut down a couple of machines, allow voters to vote on those that are open, and then once those run out of power, we'll power up the other ones. But we've only been out of power maybe half an hour at one of our outlying areas. As far as a major emergency, unfortunately, we're not able to just send voters to another polling location because unless they want to travel 3 hours, that's not going to happen. So our measures would be to, shut down while there's an issue or allow people to wait in line, let them come back once the issue is resolved, or go ahead and go directly to the courts to get an emergency order to extend the hours. But luckily, we have not had to do that at all. Now I'm just going to talk a little bit about tabulation of results, and I know this is more about polling locations, but I feel this is important as well, so hopefully I'm not going off subject. But because we have Tonopah and Pahrump, we actually tabulate in both areas. So the northern area, Round Mountain, Tonopah, everything is transported to the Tonopah clerk's office by sheriff's deputies right after the polls close. The rest of the locations, Beatty, Amargosa, those are all transported to Pahrump. And so we tabulate there as well. As far as the mail ballots, those are all tabulated in the Tonopah office. And same thing, we do allow observers. We've had them very close and sit right in on the process as close as can be without bothering anybody or disrupting the process. That's really about it, other than due to the sizes of the county, there just aren't a lot of ways to solve our issues. Funding always helps. Some of our supplies only last for so many years without having to be replaced. And recently I thought about something that I wish I'd asked for funding for, is that we travel with a U-Haul and a forklift at all of our locations because, those U-Hauls don't have lift gates. And if I'd have thought about it, I would have asked for funding for a county election truck that has a little lift gate. So that's just something I want to think about for the future, make my life a lot easier. Anyway, I just kept it brief, and I hope you have some questions for me.
Okay, thank you. Members, do we have any questions? Assemblywoman Dickman, do you have a question?
I do not, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a brief question. You mentioned some of the activities that shouldn't be done in a polling place, but the activities you mentioned were things that voters do, not realizing, they want to, like you said, they want to take pictures of their ballot, all this kind of stuff, to promote excitement. But, and so we know we don't expect that voters are reading all of the rules before they come into the polling places. However, thinking of the actual campaigns where that should be something that people are doing their due diligence with that. There were situations last time where, or I guess I should rephrase this, what should happen if there is something that's happening at a polling place that the actual people running that polling place are allowing to happen that shouldn't happen? And what then can Nevadans do to address that? Because again, the first thing people do is, I believe you use the term chairman, they go to the chairman of that polling place, but it seems that once that chairman, if they don't address it, what then can voters do at that point?
Is that a question for Heather or myself?
Either one.
Heather, I'll let you go first.
All right, thank you, Chair. I'm Heather Carmen for the record. A polling place manager is not resolving the issue that a voter is reporting. I would hope that the voter would contact us directly. We actually do have, as part of our supplies, a pad with our phone number on it that can be given to the voter to take with them. We actually sometimes do get reports from the observers that might observe some sort of not normal activity, and it does get reported directly to our office, either calling us or going through any other, like Washoe 311. And depending on the severity of it, we do handle it immediately. Because if there's an individual in a polling location that is making a scene or trying to take pictures of everybody voting in there and the manager's not able to get them out, they call us, or maybe they have to escalate it to law enforcement. But we absolutely, our office needs to know what's going on so that we can support them and help them with the situation and resolve it in a way that individuals are still being able to vote in a non-adversarial environment. And if that didn't answer your question, I'll be more than happy to clarify. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
And
member,
sorry.
Please proceed.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to, this is Sandra Merlino again. I just wanted to add to that just a little bit. In Nye County, most of our smaller polling locations don't have issues. Ours is mostly in Pahrump. And the same thing, since I am always there, especially on election day, I'm there. Most voters or observers, they report directly to me. And I usually try to take care of things immediately. And I usually will warn a person or a group. And if I've warned them once and they do it again, many times I will pick them out, remove them, whatever I have to do, or I'll bring in the sheriff's deputies. I do have deputies that roam the area on a, hourly basis. And so they're on call if there's something we really can't handle. So that's all.
Thank you. And is there a way that we can, that we as the committee could receive what's covered in the training for whether it's the poll captains or the managers? I know you were using different terms because I know that Ms. Merlino, you mentioned you drive out physically to them, and Ms. Carmen, yours may be delivered a little differently, but just so we can also see what's in the training that poll captains and receive?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much. Any additional questions? Okay, not seeing any questions, I will go ahead and close this agenda item. So agenda item 7 will be closed, and we will move on to our next agenda item, which is public comment. Again, anyone wishing to make public comment, you will have up to 2 minutes to speak. You can, for those that are calling in, you may call in now. The phone number is 669-900-6833. When prompted, you will enter the meeting ID, which is 813-7874-7720, and then press pound, and Broadcast and Production Services will indicate when it's your turn to speak. So with that, we do not have anyone physically here in Las Vegas that is approaching for public comment. In Carson City, do we have anyone approaching for public comment?
No, it doesn't appear so, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. So with that, broadcasting, do we have anyone calling in right now?
If you would like to offer public comment on today's meeting, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon. This is Tracy Thomas again, TRACEYTHOMAS. Contrary to Mr. Velasquez's assertions, counties in the state are not in full compliance with all qualifications not being verified. When citizenship is not verified, integrity cannot be ensured. The information cannot be assured to be accurate, nor is it complying with state and federal laws requiring citizenship to participate in the voting process. The counting of any provisional ballot when all the requirements have not been verified is not in compliance with NRS 293.270. Same-day registrations at polling locations do not have the resources to verify citizenship, continuous residency, or accurate residential property, felony status, etc. I have worked as a polling place manager for Washoe County since 2000 and served as an election worker trainer in 2020 and assisted in the election worker call center. Ms. Carmen failed to include the chaos managers must also address from observers battling with each other for space within polling locations, as well as the dissension and interference within waiting lines, and the electioneering at the 100 mark that often encroaches inside that mark. There is a non-emergency number that can be called, but that does nothing to discourage the behavior to begin with. The issue may have been paused by the time deputies may arrive, but it quickly resumes as soon as they leave. This has only escalated every election. There is a huge issue with the usage of cell phones in polling places, despite the signage at intake stations notifying voters that they are not allowed, except for looking at their ballot. We can ask them to hang up on calls they may be on, but we can't be expected to get physical with the voter to force them to hang up or delete any picture they may have taken. I have warned them, however, if the picture is found online, they could be prosecuted NRS. But other than that, I'm not sure what else we can do. But yes, much training and assistance in this area is definitely needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Broadcasting, do we have anyone else on the line?
Yes, Chair. One moment.
Good afternoon. This is Dora Martinez. I do represent the Nevada Disability Peer Action Coalition. I would like to thank all of you for passing the AB 121. Now people with disability can vote at their home or wherever they are with an accessible NBE format. Much thanks to the Secretary of State office and Mark. I'm not going to even attempt to say your last name. We appreciate you. Because of you, you guys included people with disabilities in that project, which is why it's 100% accessible and ADA compliant. I do want to just remind the registrar. So when the early voting and general election are primary, please have the ADA voting machines ready to go and vote, and for people with disability to get on it and just do their thing. I know that last time some people with disability were sitting there for half an hour to an hour to turn on the machine and get it ready. I mean, if you guys need help, please, call the Center for Independent Living. We can definitely help you guys get those ADA machine ready to go. And with that, I want to thank all of you, and especially Assembly or the Chairwoman, Ms. Brittany Miller. Thank you so much. I forgot to acknowledge all of you. I'm so nervous. I don't know why. But thank you so much, and have a great April Fool Day. Take care.
Thank you.
If you would like to offer public comment in today's meeting, please press *9 now to raise your hand or to take your place in the queue. Once more, *9 now to take your place in the queue. Thank you, Chair. There are no other callers wishing to offer public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we will go ahead and close public comment. I just want to, our final item for the day is adjournment. I just want to thank everyone. Before we do officially adjourn, thank you for coming, all the members, and actively participating in our first interim committee meeting on legislative operations and elections. Our next meeting is scheduled for Friday, April 29th at 9:30 a.m. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Bye.